On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 4.
Good afternoon, I'm Zora Suleiman. In the last hour, Ryan Giggs's domestic violence trial has collapsed. The jury has been discharged after failing to reach verdicts on any of the charges against him. The former Manchester United footballer denied headbutting his ex-girlfriend, using controlling and coercive behaviour against her over a 3-year period, and assaulting her younger sister. Giggs is now facing a possible retrial. Talk TV's Amelia Harper has been in court for us.
The jury in the Ryan Giggs domestic violence trial have been discharged, meaning they haven't come up with a verdict on any charge. They'd been out considering for 22 hours and 59 minutes before they were brought back shortly after 3 p.m. The judge had asked whether they'd reached a verdict on any of the charges. The answer was no. When asked if they needed more time, would they realistically reach a verdict, the answer was also no. So they were thanked and then discharged. Giggs made no reaction to what has been discussed in court this afternoon, but did hang his head when the judge read out a potential, I must emphasise, retrial date of the 5th of June. This is not a confirmation of a retrial, but a date posed for both parties to work out logistics, and they now have 7 days to decide if they want to go for a retrial.
For the first time during her reign, the Queen won't travel down to London next week to meet with the outgoing and incoming Prime Minister. In a break from tradition, she won't appoint a Prime Minister in Buckingham Palace or Windsor. Instead, Her Majesty will receive Boris Johnson at Balmoral before meeting either Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak to ask them to form a government. Breaking news now, and train drivers at 12 rail companies will strike on September the 15th in the long-running dispute over pay. The ASLEF union has just announced this. It comes after members of the TSSA union announced a fresh 24-hour strike next month. Workers at 9 train operating companies as well as Network Rail will walk out from midday on Monday, September 26. We've been told food prices are rising at their fastest rate since 2008, with overall costs up 9.3% this month. The British Retail Consortium is blaming the war in Ukraine for the rise, with fresh food costs now over 10% higher than last year. And people are gathering outside Kensington Palace to remember Princess Diana on the 25th anniversary of her death. Diana, the mother of the Duke of Cambridge and the Duke of Sussex, was just 36 when she was killed in a car crash in Paris in 1997. Well, that's the latest. Now time for today's weather with Nazanin Gaffer.
Puzzles sponsors Talk TV weather.
Hello. It's the last day of meteorological summer, and the weather is responding well to that, as well as high pressure remains in charge. So for many areas for this afternoon, we are looking at mostly fine and settled conditions. But notice towards the weekend, low pressure comes in. We are going to see rather wet and windy weather come through as we head into meteorological autumn. But until then, as I said, for this afternoon, we are going to continue to see some good amounts of sunshine. It is looking at mostly fine and bright, perhaps a little cloudier around central and eastern parts of England, where I think we may see the odd shower or two, and for parts of northern England as well. We've got a bit of a keen easterly breeze, so it's not going to feel very warm, but it will feel pleasant enough in any sunshine. The best of any sunshine out towards western and northern areas. Then going into tonight, maybe 1 or 2 showers carrying on across parts of the east. Otherwise, it's going to be a mostly fine, dry and clear night. There may be some patches of mist and fog, though, especially across parts of the north. And it will be fairly cool, not too muggy either, especially across parts of the south. For tomorrow, we do it all again. Again, another mostly fine and settled day, perhaps the odd shower or two, and it may be quite cloudy down towards parts of the southwest. But otherwise, another mostly fine and dry day before it turns rather unsettled into the weekend.
Times Puzzles sponsors Talk TV weather.
do you think shouting loudly throughout their interviews is doing any service to people?
99% of the time, I'm actually stood silent. After it's not brilliant. You can shout as much as you like. Yeah.
And a very good afternoon to one and all. It's not only Tice Talk, but it's drive time. And I'm delighted today, this afternoon, on Wednesday the 31st of August, to be joined by my co-presenter, Isabel Oakeshott. Isabel, very warm welcome to drive time this Wednesday afternoon. Are you looking forward to an action-packed show?
Thank you. I'm just wondering which one of us is in charge here.
Well, that's a very good question. I think our listeners and viewers will tell us throughout the show.
I'm going to let you take the lead to begin with, anyway. To begin with,
until Isabel realises just exactly how much better she can do it. We've got a full-on 3 hours ahead. In the first hour, we're going to be talking about the police, the latest report from Policy Exchange, the political implications of all of this. And then in the second hour, of course, we've got to look at the cost of living, the impact of that on so many businesses, and how much of this is down to net zero or the cost of energy and the relationship between the two. And we'll be talking in the third hour, Isabel, to a variety of restaurant owners.
Yes, that's right. We're going to be talking to, I think, some fish and chip shop owners. I've just come back from much of August on the Isle of Wight, where fish and chips is a big thing, but my goodness, it's getting expensive. And why is that? Well, those poor operators are facing huge hikes to their prices, and the question is how much of that can be passed on to customers, or does that kill off their business?
And we want to hear from you folks as to what price increases you're seeing with your local takeaways, your local fish and chip shops. And of course, normally I do sort of three events that happened on this day years ago, but this 25 years ago was, of course, the day that tragically Princess Diana died. And we'll be talking about that. We want to hear your memories of that day. Where were you? What you remember? Or did you meet Princess Diana? Did you have any interaction with her? And talking of interactions, we're also going to be talking about interactions about the police. And you're going to be sharing a story later, aren't you?
Yes, absolutely.
About, what interactions have you had, good or bad, with the police? Did they do a fantastic job if you had a hiccup? Or actually, was there a bit of a problem? Or did they not do anything except just give you a crime reference number? We need to hear from you on all of those. You know the number, 0344 499 1000, or text us to 87222 using the word talk, or tweet us at Talk TV, and we'll read out as many of those as we can and take as many calls as we can. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to Drive Time here on Talk TV. And of course, the big issue at the moment is law and order. And, frankly, what is going on with the police? Are they, have they become so woke they actually can't do their job? And I'm delighted now to be joined by a former officer of the Metropolitan Police, who was Chief Superintendent, Parm Sandhu. Parm, a very good afternoon. Thanks for joining us on Drive Time with Isabel and myself. Great to see you. This is, such a challenging time for the police. So much pressure on them. You've been in the, you understand that pressure. How must police officers be feeling at the moment?
Well, first of all, this report that came out today follows many others that came out earlier this year. And what the report is actually saying, and what the public are saying, is that they want police officers to be police officers, to do the job that they signed up for and that they want to do. I still speak to many of my colleagues who feel that their hands are tied behind their backs about what they can and can't do. Because I don't know, Isabel's story may later be about something like a burglary, because police officers do not, as a matter of course, turn up for burglaries anymore. And yet, if you tell the public that, they would be shocked, because you would have thought that that would be the bread and butter of policing, to catch burglars and to put them before the courts.
Yes, and absolutely. Well, I'll share my story later. It isn't actually to do with burglary, it's a car crime, but I suspect that you'll tell me that the same goes for that when it comes to car theft and issues around vehicles. The police don't have the resources or even perhaps the will to track that down either.
In relation to car thefts or theft of the vehicles, police officers do not go as a matter of course. That is another one, it's burglary and car thefts. And I think about 90%, when I looked at the figures last, 90% of those crimes are closed without any sort of investigation, which is absolutely appalling. But what I would say is that it's not solely because they haven't got the resources. The resources are being used in the wrong places.
And for example, I wonder if you could give us a few examples of that. And I think what will really annoy a lot of our viewers and listeners is when they see the police using their time in the wrong way. Now, to some extent, that may not be their fault. They're being asked to do things that they don't want to do. I wonder, what is your perception of that?
Well, at the moment, we're asking police officers to go and deal with mental health issues.
Yes.
That's because social services haven't been funded. There aren't enough social workers. There aren't enough beds in mental institutions, so police fill the gap. Police officers are being sent instead of ambulances because there aren't enough ambulances. Police officers are trained in first aid. They may turn up for your heart attack. I mean, do you really want a police officer there when you're having a heart attack? I mean, that would give me one anyway. And then, and then you've got things like, you know, protesters who think they're saving the planet, and for whatever reason they're doing their protest, they're gluing themselves to the floor.
Right.
And police officers are then looking after them, making sure that they don't dehydrate, they don't get run over. Then they're ungluing them from the floor.
I mean, this is a nonsense, isn't it? Don't get Rich and I started on this one. Do you remember when we got stuck in that awful thing when the protesters closed? I think it was Vauxhall Bridge, wasn't it? And we were stuck for. I think we had to abandon the vehicle.
We literally had to abandon the vehicle because of these protesters gluing themselves to the bridge.
And I think what struck me about that was the sheer number of police officers that were at that event but weren't doing anything. I mean, they were present, but they must have been sucking the life out of the capital's policing at that point, because there were, well, several dozen of them there, weren't there? Possibly even more than that.
Completely, and that does strike me as a real issue, Palm, with these events like the Carnival. I mean, that sucked thousands of police officers out of the rest of London and beyond.
And you have to ask yourself, why are we, as the public, and why are the politicians expecting police officers to do that? Because the police officers themselves don't want to do that. And even when you're talking about the protesters that glue themselves and get floppy and whatever else, it takes 4 officers to carry one of them away, and then they just walk straight back again.
But why, Palm, can I just ask, why does it take 4 officers? I mean, why not just, you know, put their arm up the back, 1 officer, you know, big burly chap, and just march them off the side of the road? I don't see why it needs 4 of them.
It's not actually to do with physical strength or being burly or big or anything like that. It's because you're supposed to make sure that they don't get injured. It's all about health and safety. There's supposed to be a 5th officer supporting their head as well. So it is about health and safety and about what... Is the police service going to get sued later? Are they going to say, oh, you broke my arm, you broke my leg, or you hit my head against a door jamb or something? So there's all sorts of implications there. So it does take a lot of police officers.
So Paul, I mean, we can sit here and kind of hand-wring about all of this, and I'm sure you and me and Richard all agree on these points, but the question is, how do we resolve it? And the debate that we're having today is off the back of a very hard-hitting new report by the Policy Exchange think tank saying it's time that police got less woke, they stopped wasting their time on marginal things and went back to basics. All of this is quite easy to say, but for example, you give the instance of the Extinction Rebellion protests and they gluing themselves to the ground. I mean, what are you suggesting, that we just sort of either leave them there until they get bored of being glued to the ground, or we rip them off and not worry about being sued? Or what do you see as the solutions?
I would love to say just rip them off the ground or leave them there, but I can't. I think the solution is reform. We need to look at policing. We need to look at how and what we're using police officers for. That needs to be done by politicians and police chiefs to say, right, we are not going to police this carnival. We're not going to police this particular protest. The stewards can go in or whoever. But we need to look at reform, and that needs to be top down and looking at everything that we're asking our police officers to do. And is it policing? Does it actually fit into the job description of a police officer? If it doesn't, it needs to go back to the mental health services, it needs to go back to the NHS, and they need to be told, well, we can't do it. You know, we're not paid to do that.
And Palm, just whilst you've been on, we've had a tweet in from Paul who said, in a sense, what instructions were you giving officers? Do you think there's been a change in the instructions given to frontline officers? And does that come right from the very top of the leadership? And therefore, is it a failure of the leadership?
The leadership and the instructions are based on the number of times that the police are being sued and discredited. But trust and confidence comes from achieving burglary convictions, achieving rape convictions, and it doesn't come from being woke. That's not what people want. When you see officers at pride marches and you see them dancing, the victims of homosexuality murders, such as Stephen Port, the victims of the families of those 4 young men would rather that those police officers had caught him earlier and got him imprisoned, rather than go to a pride march. And that's my view.
I'm sure a lot of people are going to agree with that. Not many people will disagree.
I think that's right. You know, I think we're all, you know, just common sense for 99.9% of the population feel as you do. It's just shocking to hear that the fear of being sued is driving so much of the way that the police are operated. I hadn't quite grasped that.
Yeah, and I suppose it's across the public services, isn't it? Yes. I mean, it also spills into the NHS. I thought your point was very interesting about the shortage on mental health services, for example, and, you know, these things are all kind of interlinked, aren't they?
Policing has become politicised, and we need to take the politics out of policing and let police officers be police officers.
Palm, I think that is a fantastic way to finish. Let police officers be police officers, and rather than care workers, because that is a different service, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. But, you know, we all know that mental health services are under huge pressure, and in many cases, you know, people don't know where else to turn, and so they do ring the police.
Exactly. Well, talking of give us a ring, 0344 499 1000 with your thoughts, your experiences, interactions, good or bad, with the police. They do get a hard time sometimes, and so if you've got some good news, please do share that with us. Stay with us. Coming up after the break, we'll be talking about that, and also the first tweets and messages are coming in about the cost of fish and chips. Absolutely vital to know that. It's drive time. It's not just Tice Talk, it's Oakshott and Tice Drive Time here on Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends, to Drive Time here on Talk TV, and it's unbelievable. Just 20 minutes in, and already the first tweet has come in from Ash, who says, Mr. Tice, we see Isabel has taken charge straight away, and you haven't noticed.
Well, I hadn't noticed. I don't think it's true. Give me time.
20 minutes, there we are. Thanks for that, Ash. Hopefully I'll get some other support elsewhere. But and another tweet here, and we're going to talk about cars and cars being stolen. This is from Terry, who says, I had my car stolen 2 days later. I got 2 letters from the police, better than one, I suppose, in the same delivery, with the same date on the letters. One stated that they'd received the report of the theft, and the second nice letter stated that the investigation had been closed.
It's like those letters you get from the NHS, isn't it? Reminding you about your appointment at outpatients, and you get 2 on the same day, and one says, make sure you turn up, and the other says, I'm sorry to inform you, it's been cancelled. And a lot of people get those letters, I'm afraid. So let's talk a bit about this car thing, because I've got my own...
Your own experience.
Tale of woe on the car front with policing. But this isn't just a sort of negative policing story, because I do have a positive story as well. So it's a little while ago now, but I left my much prized, pretty ancient, but quite pretty little car at a train station in the car park. It was a fine spring day, as I recall, and off I trotted, feeling quite happy with the world. And I then... in the early hours of the next day, received a pretty alarming call to the effect that someone had set my car on fire. And when we returned to the car park, to the scene of the crime, I'm hoping we've got some pictures here, because there was very little left of my car, I have to say. Here you can see on the screen there, you can see the car. That was what was left of my car. If you can see there, it is just a little pile of charred remains. I think the carcass of my vehicle had been carted off. Now, what had happened is that a known drug addict had broken into the vehicle and enjoyed a merry evening, lighting a little fire while he sat there. I think he was trying to hotwire it, and he tried to light a fire whilst he was trying to hotwire it in the vehicle. Pretty dangerous thing to do. And then as the flames began to lick around him, he thought that it might be a wise idea to get out, and sure enough, very soon the whole car was bursting into flames. So not much was left of my lovely little car. On a positive note, the police did actually come out to my home in the middle of the night. I think that they had worked out that the car belonged to me, and I've got a bit of a public profile, and perhaps they were concerned that this might have been some kind of personal attack. After all, Richard and I have a few enemies, don't we, politically?
Do have 1 or 2 people just not quite on our wavelength.
Yeah, as it turned out, it wasn't a personalised thing. I was just a random victim of somebody who'd had too many, I don't know what he'd been taking, but anyway. So, good for the police, they came out, but that was really the end of it as far as their investigation was concerned. I mean, the CCTV footage was actually fantastic. You know, you can see very clearly who was responsible for that crime, but they never really, I don't think, made an awful lot of effort to identify the person, and I think that they realise that, you know, all you need to do is give people a crime number and they ring their insurers and it's someone else's problem.
That's right, because, I mean, literally the charge rate for burglary or theft is, I mean, it's barely 5%, let alone 10%.
And you know what happens is you're not only a victim of the crime once, in that you've lost your vehicle or you've lost your belongings, and it's absolutely awful to be burgled. You know, that's a really invasive and frightening thing, even if you're not aware of them in your house at the time. But then what happened to me, and I'm sure happens to many others, is that your insurance premiums go up because you've had to claim. And so you're sort of, you know, you really are sort of, you feel doubly insulted and upset by it.
Completely, and I think, you know, people just want to know that it's going to be taken seriously, particularly when you've got high-quality CCTV footage of the criminal's face.
Exactly.
You sort of think that should be easy.
Yes, and it wasn't in the centre of London. You know, this was, you know, in a part of the world where it might be possible to track that person down. I do want to have a more positive story, though. At one point, a couple of years ago, I was also being targeted by an online stalker. and it was pretty unpleasant. And I must give credit to the police at the minute I flagged this up, even though I was very clear that I didn't feel personally in danger. They came straight out to the house, spent a good time with me, taking every detail that they could, and that problem was resolved very, very quickly indeed.
So there we are. There we have a positive. And we have a caller as well from Portrush, who is on the line with, as a former police officer. Kim, a very good afternoon to you. How are you?
Good afternoon, Richard and Isabel. It's actually Tim, but you know.
Go for it. What's your story, Tim? Not Kim. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. Well, I'm retired 13 years now out of the police, and you were talking about the crime clearance rates. And whenever I was in the job, they should have been sort of 25%, and the CID departments were getting quite a lot of hassle if they weren't even clearing a quarter of the crime. But you're quite right. Nowadays, the police just do not want to know. They really do not want to know. And as some of the reasons that were given earlier on, that the police are performing the roles of paramedics, and it's just a lack of doing the basics. The police are there to protect the public, to prevent and detect crime and to preserve life. And they are not doing the basics. And when they don't do the basics, everything else tumbles after that. I know it seems a bit silly to say the guy on the bike who's got no lights, doesn't have a helmet, rides on the footpath.
That's probably Richard.
Those children will grow up knowing that it's okay to break the law because nothing's going to happen. So then they'll get into petty crime and nothing's going to happen, like Isabel's car being set on
Tim,
fire.
that's the whole broken windows policy, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's so bad. And the lack of training that police officers get in the law is appalling. And I put my hand up. I spent 30 years in the police. I then went to university and I studied law, and I thought to myself, oh my God, how much did I not know? It's appalling.
In a couple of sentences, Tim, what's the answer? What's the solution if you were the Home Secretary next week?
Well, back to basics. Back to basics. We have to teach the generation of today, the 6 and 7 and 8-year-olds, that being bad on the street or committing minor crimes on the street is not going to go unpunished. And that generation will then grow up realizing that you've got to respect law and order, and you've got to obey the law. The way it is at the minute, nobody obeys the law. And, you know, if you do try and shout at people or complain that they have broken the law and say you'll get the police, you get a letter. That's no way to police a community, by sending them a letter and saying your investigation is now complete 2 days after the investigation.
It's hopeless. It just leads to a lack of confidence. And confidence is so important, isn't it, Tim? Tim, thank you so much indeed for sharing those thoughts with us. Extraordinary. Back to basics, Isabel.
I mean, I kind of slightly recoil at that phrase, but he's right, isn't he? It's exactly what this report is saying, and here's hoping that the police get given the resources to do that.
Absolutely. Well, coming up after the news, we are going to be talking to Peter Cardwell here in the studio. He'll be giving us the latest political insight with only just a matter of a few days to go before we've actually got a new Home Secretary, and maybe we'll get back to basics. Stay with us, don't go anywhere. It's Drive Time here at Talk TV.
Join me, Ian Collins, every day on Talk TV.
There is nothing we hate more than hypocrisy.
Discussing the big issues.
Why was it so hard to establish the deputy leader was at a meeting with her colleagues?
The callers.
Alan in Grimsby, Tracy in Burton-on-Trent. Dave, thank you very much.
Picking apart the big stuff.
This simply does not wash. Look who's back under the spotlight.
This is Talk TV News.
Good afternoon, I'm Zora Suleiman. Ryan Giggs's domestic violence trial has collapsed. The jury has been discharged after failing to reach verdicts on any of the charges against him. The former Manchester United footballer denied headbutting his ex-girlfriend, using controlling and coercive behaviour against her over a 3-year period, and assaulting her younger sister. Talk TV's Amelia Harper has been at court for us.
Giggs made no reaction to what has been discussed in court this afternoon, but did hang his head when the judge read out a potential, I must emphasise, retrial date of the 5th of June. This is not a confirmation of a retrial, but a date posed for both parties to work out logistics, and they now have 7 days to decide if they want to go for a retrial.
For the first time during her reign, the Queen won't travel down to London next week to meet with the outgoing and incoming Prime Minister. In a break from tradition, she won't appoint a Prime Minister in Buckingham Palace or Windsor. Instead, Her Majesty will receive Boris Johnson at Balmoral before meeting either Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak to ask them to form a government. More rail chaos as 2 more strikes have been announced today. Train drivers at 12 rail companies will walk out on September the 15th in the long-running dispute over pay. It comes after members of the TSSA union also announced a fresh 24-hour strike next month as well. Workers at 9 train operating companies as well as Network Rail will walk out from midday on Monday, September the 26th. And people have gathered outside Kensington Palace to remember Princess Diana on the 25th anniversary of her death. Diana, the mother of the Duke of Cambridge and the Duke of Sussex, was just 36 when she was killed in a car crash in Paris in 1997. Well, that's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
Welcome back, my friends, and that was a great chat there with Palm Sandhu, and meanwhile we've just had an extraordinary tweet here about crime, which I just share with you. I mean, this is extraordinary, Isabel. My friend runs his own business. He had his van stolen. The police, they never came out to speak to him, but they generously gave him a crime number. 1 week later, the police turned up, together with the council officer, wanting to charge him with fly tipping.
Unbelievable. It's
Unbelievable.
It's great that they were all over it.
They were all over
at the
it.
wrong time.
They'd found his business cards in the field that obviously been dumped by the tow rags that stole his van. Well, there we are. Maybe a lack of joined-up thinking. Anyway, delighted to be joined in the studio by Peter Cardwell, who is, of course, Talk Radio's guru and political editor. Peter, thankfully, just not too many days to go now before we get...
We're almost there. We're almost there, yeah. We're going to find out on Monday around lunchtime, about 12 or 12:30. It's going to be at the Queen Elizabeth II Centre in Westminster that we get the final result. Only really one fact, which is who it is, and we kind of know that already. On Monday, we'll get the percentages as well, which will be fascinating. I'd be surprised if Liz Truss doesn't win by a round or more than Boris Johnson did in 2019, when Boris Johnson won 2/3 of the vote. And then it's sort of about 24 hours until Boris Johnson resigns formally as Prime Minister. He's actually going to do that at Balmoral rather than Buckingham Palace. It's usually been Buckingham Palace for the Queen's other 15 previous Prime Ministers, but she's at Balmoral. You might ask the question, why does a 96-year-old woman have to necessarily get on a plane and go down to London simply for something which can easily be done in Balmoral? Far better for the younger woman, probably, in Liz Truss to get a flight up to Balmoral.
I think that's fair enough, isn't it? Is it true that Boris and Liz, the winner, if it's Liz Truss, are going to go up on the same plane?
Well, that'll be interesting, because obviously with the monarch, you can't have the heir to the throne. Charles and William can't fly on the same flight in case the plane crashes. Whereas it would be interesting if 2 Prime Ministers, the one who's just about to resign as the Prime Minister, you know, we don't want anything like that to happen, of course, but it would be very interesting. Also, there'll be the Prime Ministerial plane that the RAF will have, and will Liz Truss, who's technically Foreign Secretary, would she have to go on another plane? I don't know. It would be really interesting to see. But the Queen will kiss hands. They don't actually kiss hands. That comes later at the Privy Council. But the Prime Minister will formally resign. The Queen will formally dismiss him, and then she'll see Liz Truss and make her Prime Minister, if in fact she wins, which she probably will, let's face it.
But there is something happening tonight, isn't there? What's the final hustings is happening tonight?
Finally, yes, in London, it is the 12th and final hustings, so Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak will be at that. It's going to be a very big event at a very big venue. We can't say where it is for security reasons, but it is in London, and lots of people going there, and mostly Conservative members, although some who aren't, and media as well, and it is the final of the 12th.
I mean, how much point is there now at this stage in these hustings? Because we think that pretty much everybody has voted, haven't they?
You're absolutely right as well. I think that is almost certainly the case. Although there are a few people, there are people I know in the Conservative Party I've been speaking to who are going to this one in London, for example, who do want to just see them in the flesh. And the thing is, as all three of us know, people who are involved in politics, who've paid their money, who want to be a member of a party, usually want to see the person, maybe even talk to them directly or shake their hand just before they perhaps make that decision. But you're absolutely right. The vast majority of people have probably, in the 160,000 people in the Conservative Party, have probably voted already, or at least made up their mind.
I mean, it is actually at these hustings that Rishi Sunak does win over quite a few doubters. I mean, I really pick up from talking to Conservative Party activists and members, those who have a vote in this, that they have a bit of a head versus heart situation here. Their heart actually wants to go with Rishi, oddly, partly because he's just a much warmer, more engaging, immediately easier personality. So when they see him and talk to him at hustings, they're quite won over, but their heads say, actually, we've got to go with Liz Truss, because what we really want, and the primary thing we care about at this point, is tax cuts.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, and it'll be interesting to see also how Liz Truss has to react when she's going to, just for another few days, to the Conservative Party base. But when she becomes Prime Minister, is she going to be forced into a position where she's actually not in a right-wing economic place, she's actually in quite a left-wing socialistic economic place? So that could be interesting as well.
But there's been so much chat about, obviously the cost of living, tax cuts, the finances, but actually we've been talking just on this show so much about policing, about law and order, the collapsing confidence and that, and arguably there hasn't been as much focus in these hustings on the importance of law and order. And you could say that the role of the new Home Secretary is actually possibly more challenging than the role of the potential new Chancellor.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, a new Chancellor will have to make big decisions, but once those decisions are made, they'll probably stick to them and see it through, whereas the Home Secretary has a job that is dynamic and moves every single day. There can be security things that come up, policing things, immigration, crime, etc. So there's lots. It's a very, very complex job, and yes, there hasn't been a lot of scrutiny of that. The position, though, of the current Home Secretary, Priti Patel, is fascinating, because she's talking today, she's saying the police should be less woke, for example. Question, why haven't you said that for the last 3 years that you've been Home Secretary? Could it be that you want to perhaps raise your profile with the reshuffle next week? I know there's been a lot of behind-the-scenes machinations, because Priti Patel hasn't formally endorsed anyone. She was thinking of running herself, couldn't really get the backers from what I can understand, and then we got to a stage where she was saying, apparently behind the scenes, that she was going to endorse Liz Truss, but never quite got round to it. And then the Liz Truss people said, well, if you're not going to endorse us, that's the way things are. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens to her in the reshuffle. And I don't think she quite has the same position in the Conservative Party that she did maybe a few years ago.
I think you're absolutely right about that, Peter, and I would say her chances of remaining in the Home Office are precisely zero. She's left it far too late, and one thing that you didn't mention there but is so important is this ongoing issue with the Channel migrants.
Oh, totally.
And she
talked so tough, didn't she? She talked so tough for such a long time, and then finally became Home Secretary, and in 3 years she just hasn't turned that situation around.
They failed, and to me she deserves to lose her job over that. I'm sorry, I just...
Completely, but for me... in so many different departments, they're very good at talking the talk, and you feel warm and reassured, as many people will at these hustings. But then it's the failure to deliver, the failure to follow up.
So, I mean, I saw a headline yesterday about some kind of app that is going to enable you supposedly to jump the queue or get further ahead with your NHS waiting time. And I just thought, you know what, it's not going to happen. It isn't going to happen. No app in the world is going to make up for the fact that we don't have enough doctors and nurses to actually do these operations.
You're absolutely right.
Quite right, too. Just whilst we've been talking, this is a great tweet here. Very contemporary, very good for the environment. The Queen, could she not appoint the new Prime Minister and dismiss the old one by Zoom?
Well, I think there will be environmental campaigners who will calculate the CO2 from the flight or possible flights as well, and say this is ludicrous and they could have just gone to Buckingham Palace and why isn't she there?
Does have a point, though.
It's if it can be done, it's interesting. The constitutional expert, this guy Professor Vernon Bogdaner, says there's no reason why it can't be done anywhere. In fact, with one monarch many years ago, I think over 100 years ago, it was done in France rather than in the UK at all. So
I don't think we should go down that road.
No, Probably not. Probably not.
But I do think this. I mean, we just had a tweet here from Amy who says, "I hope we get a new Home Secretary. The last two have been a disaster. Theresa May cut the police force. We forget that by 20,000, which was, I mean, it was about 15%." Of police officers.
And it was that whole thing about you've got to be able to do more with less, but at some point it comes down to doing less with a lot less, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly. And the Home Office being, as we know, the sort of department where careers go to die. Obviously that didn't happen to Theresa May, but it certainly didn't help Amber Rudd's career over the Windrush affair and subsequent Home Secretaries as well.
Is it too big a job for one person? Should you split the department?
Well, they split it a few years ago between the Home Office and the Ministry of Justice, but the Home Office is absolutely huge. Immigration in this country as a system has never really worked, and some people say there should be a Department of Immigration simply to look into that. Security, for example, is hugely important, and even more important now because we've moved from sort of Irish republicanism to a more asymmetrical look in terms of Islamic fundamentalism. Should there be a security department or Homeland Security Department as they do in America? So there are lots of arguments around this, and the Home Office is a really tough place, and institutionally there's a lot of resistance as well to any change.
I think that's a really good point. Viewers, listeners, give us a call, send us a tweet or a text. Do you think that actually the Home Office should be broken up? Maybe there should be a Department of Immigration and then a Department for Justice. It's just too big for one person. Look forward to your thoughts, your views. Peter Cardwell, as always, thank you very much indeed for that. After the break, we'll be taking your calls, your messages and your tweets. Do not go anywhere. It's Drive Time on Talk TV.
Welcome back to TV. Talking talking about plans for the appointment of the new Prime Minister next week, and now we're going to look at some of the tweets and the calls that have been coming in.
So we've got a tweet from Mitch, which is that Mitch says, Richard and Isabel, until the courts get tough with offenders, there's really no point in the police pursuing perpetrators of car crime and burglary. 9 times out of 10, the offender will be drunk or on drugs or a juvenile, in many cases, all three. What's the point if they're just going to find the courts become a revolving door for petty criminals, and are the police wasting their time?
Well, and how quickly does that door actually revolve as well? Because this is the other issue. There's such a backlog of cases that it takes so long for these small things to actually come in front of a judge or in front of a magistrate that all this stuff just builds up and builds up. And
it's literally years now, even for serious cases. I almost wonder whether you should almost set a sort of parallel new team to take up new cases, so the existing system could deal with the existing backlog, and you have a completely new team, essentially of justice to deal with new crimes, because otherwise it just gets worse and worse.
Well, I also think there should be some kind of limitation. You know, it is awful for people if they've been accused of something. I know here we haven't had a lot of sympathy for the perpetrators of crime, but let's remember plenty of people are accused of things that they didn't do, and to have that hanging over you, in some cases for well over a year, but by which time you've been suspended from work and so on. This is really a horrible, horrible thing for people to go through.
Absolutely horrific. Well, let's go to Merseyside, which obviously has been so much in the news recently for the horrific murder and so much tragedy there. David is on the line. Good afternoon, David. Welcome to Drive Time.
Good evening, Richard and Isabel. Can I pursue this business about the police?
Please do.
Well, one of the problems is the police want reorganising. They've got 42 police forces. It's too many. Now, the government tried to reorganise them some years ago, and the police don't like it. They like it the way it is, because what happens with chief constables, they all get the job. They all pass round, and they all eventually get chief constable.
So why...
I mean, it wants to... Isn't it too many? 42... in a small country like ours.
Why do you think that matters? I mean, what difference would it make if it were reorganised?
You have about 8 or 10, and you only have one chief constable to each area. The Welsh have their own, Scotland have their own. There's no... It's the police resist them. They don't let it out because they know that their turn will come to be the chief constable. And can I just say, I was on the police committee, and a lot of the chief constables are not up to the job.
And what do you think of these police crime commissioners? What are they called? What's their official title?
Police and crime commissioners.
I don't know what they were thinking.
Does anyone know who they are?
20 years ago, I'm in my 80s now, and the police committee's done a grand job. I don't know what's the idea of doing away with police committees.
But, David, do you think it's actually the number of police forces, or actually the quality of the leadership, the quality of the chief constables? I was struck the other day when I was reminded that sort of 40, 50 years ago, most of the chief constables actually were ex-military.
Yeah, they were. They're not now, though.
No, they're not.
And pass it round. They all get the trade regards chief constables. They all pass it round. They all because it's 42 of them. They all get their trade.
Yeah, it feels to me, David, as though actually it may have worked better when you had that military discipline. David, great call. Thank you very much indeed. What do you think, Isabel? Do you think it's the sort of the structure of the number of police forces?
I mean, I can see what he's saying. You know, he's just sort of saying there's too many chiefs, and they're all waiting for their turn, and, you know, everyone's waiting in line for a promotion. I'm not convinced that that's at the heart of the problem here.
I'm really struck by the idea that we need more ex-military. That used to be the case, I think, sort of, 30, 40, 50 years ago. It seems to be much, much diminished, and I think that probably...
I would like to see the police being allowed to use a bit more discretion. You know, too many times I'm seeing cases of very aggressive policing of really minor and marginal times. We saw a lot of this during the pandemic, where they ought to be allowed to exercise a bit of a judgment as to whether something is or isn't worth pursuing.
Completely right, absolutely. Well, from the challenging news of the police and how to improve it, we are going to take... we've got a quick call from Sonia, who's on the Isle of Wight, about fish and chips, Sonia.
Hello, yes.
Hi there. Hi, what's... What news from from the Isle of Wight about the local fish and chips?
Well, I think Isabel was overcharged.
Oh,
because,
really?
Yes, I've never paid that amount of money for fish and chips.
I think I need to know whereabouts on the Isle of Wight you are and whether I need to move location.
Well, we live in Ryde.
I thought you might say that. So did you get your fish and chips from the Codfather?
No, I get them from Chipmunks in Monk Street.
Now I'm getting a full list now of all the fish and chip shops on the Isle of Wight. So, Sonia, I normally go and get my fish and chips in rather posh Bembridge, and that might be my mistake, but I have to say they are excellent fish and chips, and I think we paid £17 for 2 portions, but they were absolutely enormous. And what on earth do you do with leftover fish and chips? They really aren't that nice, are they? Does anyone eat those?
Pardon?
Do you ever eat leftover fish and chips? Do you ever get a portion?
No, they're cooked. I phone her up from here and tell her what I want, and then she gets them ready for me. Go in the car and pick them up.
Yeah, but don't you ever get too many and you can't eat them all? Or
there's far too many on the yes, and so I shared them with my husband. We have
1 portion between 2, so it's not £6.75. Yeah. It's I can't do the maths. It's 3.37 and a half.
And she put the price up 2 or 3 months ago, and she said that she apologised to me for having to put them up £1.
Wow.
Well, so that's quite significant actually, because that's 20% from £5.75 to £6.75, give or take.
Yes.
That's a lot, isn't it, Sonia?
Well, it seemed a lot at the time, but we've been going to her for 22 years now, so we know that it's good fish and chips. Oh, and she always puts a slice of lemon in with them as well for me.
You're making us hungry now.
We're getting hungry. It's only not yet tea time. Sonia, great call. Thank you very much indeed. From the Isle of Wight, we're going to cruise straight down to North Somerset, where Wendy is on the line. Hi, Wendy.
Hello, Richard, and hello, Isabel.
Hi.
I really enjoy watching your show. Just to say that I'm retired now, but this is going back nearly 40 years ago. I mean, I've been retired some years, but I worked in a civilian capacity for the Avon and Somerset Police, and there was one day that one of my uniformed colleagues said to me, he said, we are nothing more than paramilitary social workers.
Right.
So I think that this problem has been going on for many years within the police force.
I think you're absolutely right. I do think it has got a lot worse. And, you know, this whole issue around social services and shortage of mental health resources is really having a knock-on effect on a lot of other public services, actually, including education and the NHS itself.
Yeah.
I mean, I was very struck, Wendy, when I went on a shift, actually, in London with in a sort of a fast response car for a number of hours, and it struck me that actually more of what they had to do on one shift was essentially social work. It was essentially social work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, they used to say to me, because I worked alongside them, and the hours that they put in on paperwork to get these people that are committing crime to justice. When they got to court, they'd get no more than a slap on the wrist.
Yeah, that's right. And Wendy, when you were a police officer, can you remember, just roughly, what sort of percentage of crimes would end up with someone being charged?
I wasn't actually a uniform. I worked as a civilian.
Oh, OK, right, you were a civilian with it. Right, I got it.
Yes, I was.
Did you have a sense of...
Sorry?
Did you have a sense of, you know, how much was actually getting solved, or was that not really part of your job?
No, that wasn't really part of my job, but I was actually inside a police station, and I could actually see my colleagues slaving away hours on end, writing up reports and no end of paperwork, and they were disillusioned and depressed by the fact that all their effort of going to court amounted to almost nothing.
I can imagine how dispiriting that must be. And also all that time spent on paperwork is not what you go into police force to do, is it? It's a bit like journalists don't want to sit in front of computers all day. They want to be out. And
I was struck, actually, and Wendy, when I did that shift, I was struck that the technology really was not up to it. It was still in the dark ages.
Yeah, well, I mean, they are under-resourced, and all these cutbacks, so much wastage of money by the government that have just squander money where it's not going to the right places.
Yeah, well, that's it. We should stop wasting so much money. Wendy, thank you so much for calling. Great call. Thanks for sharing that with us. We've had lots of messages coming in here. Andy, Isabel, so this is interesting, says many police officers used to be squaddies, former soldiers.
Yeah.
And I'd heard that before.
I mean, also, the recruitment process is incredibly long-winded, isn't it? And whether we could get more of a, quality applicants if they knew that it was only going to take a few months rather than a year or something.
I think that's right. I've heard about that. I've heard the same in the armed forces. That,
oh, yeah, absolutely.
And that, therefore, again, people can't afford to sort of sit around waiting for a response. You need to know you're in the process, it's going to happen, and you're either going to be accepted and into training or not.
Yeah.
We've just before we go to the top of the hour, Gary, he messages in, great show, Rich and Isabel. I noticed about the year 2000, it went from being a police force to a police service, and the lack of policing causes feral kids to grow up and not having respect, and the police seem scared to challenge them.
Yeah.
Anyway, give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Lots of top tips coming in about how to cook and how to store leftover fish and chips. You're learning it all here with Isabel and Richard on Drive Time at Talk TV. Don't go anywhere. Keep with us.
On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 5.
Good afternoon, I'm Zora Suleiman. Ryan Giggs is facing a possible retrial after a jury failed to reach a verdict on any of the charges against him. The former Manchester United footballer denied headbutting his ex-girlfriend, using controlling and coercive behaviour against her over a 3-year period, and assaulting her younger sister. Talk TV's Amelia Harper has been at court for us.
Giggs made no reaction to what has been discussed in court this afternoon, but did hang his head when the judge read out a potential, I must emphasise, retrial date of the 5th of June. This is not a confirmation of a retrial, but a date posed for both parties to work out logistics, and they now have 7 days to decide if they want to go for a retrial.
For the first time during her reign, the Queen won't travel down to London next week to meet with the outgoing and incoming Prime Minister. In a break from tradition, she won't appoint a Prime Minister in Buckingham Palace or Windsor. Instead, Her Majesty will receive Boris Johnson at Balmoral before meeting either Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak to ask them to form a government. We've been told food prices are rising at their fastest rate since 2008, with overall costs up 9.3% this month. The British Retail Consortium is blaming the war in Ukraine for the rise, with fresh food costs now over 10% higher than last year. Boris Johnson has admitted the next few months will be challenging.
Don't forget that when the handover comes, the next Prime Minister is unquestionably going to have another package to help. But in the meantime, what you've got to do, and what we've been doing flat out really since Putin unleashed his war, is accelerate the supply of UK energy.
The ASLEF union has announced that train drivers at 12 rail companies will strike on September the 15th in the long-running dispute over pay. It comes after members of the TSSA union also announced a fresh 24-hour strike next month. Workers at 9 train operating companies, as well as Network Rail, will walk out from midday on Monday, September the 26th. A 27-year-old man has become the third person to be arrested by police investigating the death of council worker Ashley Dale in Liverpool this month. The 28-year-old was shot dead 10 days ago in the back garden of a house in the Old Swan area. And the UK's COVID alert level has been downgraded from level 3 to 2. The change was recommended by the UK's 4 chief medical officers. However, they warn that further surges are still likely and people should be prepared by getting a vaccination when it's offered. Well, that's the latest. Now time for today's weather with Nazanin Gaffer.
Times Puzzles sponsors Talk TV weather.
Hello. It's the last day of meteorological summer, and the weather is responding well to that, as well as high pressure remains in charge. So for many areas for this afternoon, we are looking at mostly fine and settled conditions. But notice towards the weekend, low pressure comes in. We are going to see rather wet and windy weather come through as we head into meteorological autumn. But until then, as I said, for this afternoon, we are going to continue to see some good amounts of sunshine. It is looking at mostly fine and bright, perhaps a little cloudier around central and eastern parts of England, where I think we may see the odd shower or two, and for parts of northern England as well. We've got a bit of a keen easterly breeze, so it's not going to feel very warm, but it will feel pleasant enough in any sunshine. The best of any sunshine out towards western and northern areas. Then going into tonight, maybe 1 or 2 showers carrying on across parts of the east. Otherwise, it's going to be mostly fine, dry and clear night. There may be some patches of mist and fog, though, especially across parts of the north. And it will be fairly cool, not too muggy either, especially across parts of the south. For tomorrow, we do it all again. Again, another mostly fine and settled day, perhaps the odd shower or two, and it may be quite cloudy down towards parts of the southwest. But otherwise, another mostly fine and dry day before it turns rather unsettled into the weekend.
Times Puzzles sponsors Talk TV weather.
The
The Sunday Night Club is your club. I'll take you inside the dressing room, from the terraces to the boardroom, to ask the questions you want answered. There is no membership required for the Sunday Night Club from 7.
Welcome back, my friends, to Drive Time with Isabel and Richard. And not only, as per the intro there, is it real lives, real people, but also real tips, top tips are pouring in on the Twitter feed. We've got one message here that says you can freeze leftover chips and then cook them in the oven the following day, just like normal frozen chips. They are lovely. Thank you very much for that top tip. We've also heard that in Woodbridge, and keep these tips coming in and any other pricing, but in Woodbridge, apparently there's a pensioners fish and chips special for £6. So there we are. Anybody can beat that. I will look forward to knowing. And we're going to carry on this theme, aren't we, Isabel, of, just the cost of living, food prices and things, because we're delighted to be joined on the line with Georgie Frost, who is the personal finance journalist and host of This Is Money podcast. Georgie, you're in somewhat hot demand at the moment in terms of not only This Is Money, but how can we make it stretch further and further?
Yeah, I think you're talking about where I am at the moment. I'm actually calling from Madrid. So welcome to you both. Yes, Richard, Isabel. Yeah, hot demand. There's a lot of work to be done, to be fair, for finance journalists. We seem to be talking a lot more than the politicians at the moment, which is a bit unfortunate.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think we'd rather hear from you than the politicians sometimes. Probably got more solutions than they have, Georgie.
Well, yes. I have to agree with you there, Isabel. I think we're all waiting with bated breath and quite a bit of annoyance at the fact that we really don't have a decent package of support measures that have come out in light of new energy price cap rises. All of the support measures that we've had announced by the government were done over the past 6 months, when the predictions about price cap were totally different to what they are now. We're seeing, as well, as you've been talking about in your news and on your programme, that food price inflation is at its highest level since the financial crash. You throw all these things together with energy price rises, with fuel at the pumps, with all sorts of things that households are having to face, and it's an absolutely torrid time, and it's particularly hurting those on the poorest income who spend the most of their money on the essentials that we've just been talking about.
There is a bit of relief at the pumps, isn't there? I've noticed that fuel is certainly a few pence less than it was, let's say, 10 days, 2 weeks ago, but that is really going from a very, very high base indeed.
Yeah, I'm going to get quite geeky because I've actually written an article about just this today. And at its height, I think on July the 4th or June the 4th, it was 190, I think. But then you saw some petrol pumps charging way more
over
than that,
£2.
retailers.
Yeah.
Over £2. It has dropped to about 170 or 183 for diesel. But when you compare it to this time last year, that's 130. So that's a significant rise. And look, when you're facing down energy price rises almost 4 times what they were, last year, then 20p off a litre of petrol is not exactly going to cheer you up, is it?
It's not. And of course, these food price rises, I mean, they're partly driven by the increase in the food itself, the raw materials, particularly because of Ukraine, but also by the cost of energy. And in a sense, what concerns me, Georgie, is that I just don't see this cost of energy coming down materially for potentially for years. I think there's a lot of sort of optimistic hope, but I'm not sure that's really in touch with reality.
It's crystal ball gazing, isn't it, at the moment, as to what's going to happen. They suggest that these high food prices are going to continue for the next 6 months, but look, how long is the war in Ukraine going to go on for? What is pushing up these prices is the fact that the cost of fertiliser, wheat, vegetable oils, all these things that are made in Russia or produced in Russia and Ukraine, or largely so, are not getting through. So this is what's pushing up prices. I don't know what's going to happen. You're absolutely right. This could go on for many years to come. They're expecting certainly the energy prices are going to continue for at least into 2024 at these levels, which are just unimaginable. Every week, it seems, we hear a brand new level, which is just mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing rises. So we don't know what's going to happen at all, but I hate to say it, it's not going to get better anytime soon.
And what are you hearing in terms of, you know, your listeners, people that you're in touch with, in terms of the way it's changing all of our behaviour in terms of what we're buying, whether we're cooking in a different way, whether we're washing in a different way? It's just all these, I mean, it literally is that very sort of corny expression, back to basics.
Oh, it's my favourite expression at the moment, because essentially it is at the moment. But, I mean, ask yourself, Richard, Isabel, have you noticed that you've changed the way that you behave in shops? I certainly have.
Well, in shops and elsewhere. I mean, we were literally talking about this, weren't we, at the weekend, Richard, as I put on the kettle for about the 50th time in the day. And honestly, it probably didn't need to go on that often, because half the time, I think a lot of people do this, you put the kettle on, you walk away, you do something else, and when you come back, it's not tip-top hot, so you put it back on again. And in the end, you've probably boiled it 3 times for 1 cup of tea. And then I started thinking, I wonder how much that cost, and is it ridiculous to start counting that? And what else might cost a lot? You know, how much does it cost to have a long bath instead of a really quick shower? I don't know, but we started looking into this, didn't we, Richard? And we'll be talking about that in a bit, I think.
I mean, we didn't... Go for it, Georgie.
I was just going to say, look, we are noticing it. I've certainly noticed it when I go around the shops. I'll go around with a trolley, and then I'll take out some of the things that I, you know, really don't need at the end. And a lot of people are doing that. They're setting price caps themselves when they reach the till. You know, sadly, people are spending more on credit cards and borrowing. They're changing their supermarkets, changing to value brands, all sorts of things. We are actually changing as, you know, our habits, and that's just our food shopping habits. Our energy as well is something that, and actually I would suggest some of the habits that we've had with energy, like Isabel was suggesting there, are a little bit wasteful.
Yes.
And actually we probably could do a little bit more. But this little bit more I'm talking about, changing light bulbs, not doing the kettle multiple times, etc., are not going to cut it when it comes to these energy price rises for people.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, it's only going to save a few pence here and there at best, isn't it?
I mean, but it's sort of, it just all adds up, I suppose. You know, if you look after the pennies, the pounds look after themselves. And unbelievable, I have actually got the data that the price per use of a 100-litre bath before the latest price, the October price rise, was about 27 pence using a gas boiler, and that's going to double to over 55 pence per bath. So I mean, you know, it's sort of, it all starts, you know, it all starts somewhere, doesn't it? And it just it rises up. And I mean, just even the cost of a Sunday roast, people are going to start to think about that, aren't they?
Well, yes, it's. I mean, us newspapers love to write in those terms, because it's terms that people understand. Look, if your Sunday roast is going to go up by a couple of quid, it's going to make you think twice, but people are already thinking twice. This is why when we say, you know, back to basics, do sweat the small stuff, it's those sorts of things. But the reality is, a third of people are not going to be able to afford this October's price rise. We're expecting it to be over £5,000 in January. All of these little things, like I say, as great as they are, they can shave a couple of £100 here and there, or whatever, are great, but they will not cut it. So there are things I would urge people to do. If you are struggling, especially with your energy, contact your supplier. They have a duty of care if you inform them that you're struggling to pay, to put you on some sort of prepayment plan or come up with some options. Contact Citizens Advice as well. They'll tell you about all the grants and things that you might be eligible for. Just for goodness sake, don't stop paying if you can possibly help it. It can cause all sorts of problems. You can get into debt. They will come after you. They can arrange the debt collectors. It would be a mess for you. So do what you can. Get help, there's support around, and then I would urge the government to do more, and I would urge the energy companies to also do more. Whatever the critics say about what British Gas have done at the moment in terms of their payment plan and their help for the lowest income customers, it is not enough, but it is a start, and we need energy firms to help out, I think, here too.
It's a start, Georgia, and you're so right, that is so important. Pay something and tell the energy company or whoever you owe something to, you know, what you're trying to do, that you're paying a bit, and then they can see that you're trying, as opposed to paying nothing. Georgie, thank you so much for that. I mean, I think that really is important. Manage people's expectations and show that you're trying.
I had a text only today, I think, from one of my providers saying, you know, energy costs are rocketing, as if we haven't noticed. Are you in difficulty? If so, look, there's lots of information on our website. I mean, I didn't look at it because I wasn't really sure what they could possibly do to kind of spare the misery that's to come. But I guess it shows that they're very conscious that there is a crisis brewing here in terms of a lot of their customers simply defaulting.
There must be. Georgie, thank you so much indeed for your thoughts. Live from Madrid. Learning more top tips over in Madrid. That's Georgie Frost, the personal finance journalist and host of This Is Money podcast. You'll get lots more top tips there. Just before we go to the break, we've got time for a quick call down in Salisbury, where Andy is waiting. Hi, Andy.
Hello, Richard. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Good. What would you like to say to Isabel and I?
Oh, I'd just like to say I absolutely adore Isabel's view on politics and the death penalty. Absolutely brilliant. I just want to... I'm not very happy because this whole situation with the police is not the police. I mean, 20 years ago, before Tony Blair, we would be blaming the Home Secretary for all this crime. But, you know, they seem to have got a free pass. And, I mean, the current Home Secretary can't even keep migrants out, and we're here we are, we're blaming the police who are fighting to arrest people because they might get accused of being racist or stepping over the line. And it's the laws, and for as far as I'm concerned, it's the politicians, the CPS especially, because both Keir Starmer and there was another head of the CPS who were both very far left, you know, seem to get away with it, and the judges seem to, you know, we've got all these judges, and not one of them is corrupt. That's amazing. Could they tell everybody else how they do it? I just think it's an organised crime. We've got so much organised crime. Yeah.
So what would your solution be if you had a magic wand?
I would literally, there's lots. Why are we giving passports to sex offenders, fraudsters? There's so many different types of methods we can do. It means it's our detection rate, which I think is the biggest problem, because there's criminals walking around who've never been arrested. And I personally think we need to really invest in, you know, getting these people and taking pulling the rug out from underneath their feet, because I think they're the biggest problems. Like, I mean, how many thousands visited the Cray twins' funeral? Oh, we haven't got a problem with organised crime, and yet we make films about the rise of a foot soldier. Oh, they're having a nice life, and it's like apparently in Liverpool all the organised criminals have gone to their villas.
As we know, Andy, we know that some of these really violent drugs gangs, criminal gangs, have been taken over by some of the Albanian gangs, and they're sort of even more violent than before. Andy, great call. Thank you very much. We have to say thank you for that, and lots more messages coming in. Oh, a top tip here, Isabel. We've just bought an old school whistle kettle. It works out cheaper on a gas ring than electric.
Right. Okay.
And because when it's whistling, you won't forget it, and so that'll remind you to go back and use the water when it's hot.
You up for that in the flat? I'm kind of seeing that. I think that the whistling would really annoy you.
But there's no gas in the flat. Just another top tip.
That's just your escape from that one, I think.
There we are. That's a small technical matter. Stay with us. Coming up after the break, we'll be hearing from the one and only former Drive Time presenter, because we've nicked his seat, Jeremy Kyle, about what he's got on his show this afternoon. Stay with us. It is Isabel and Richard at Drive Time on Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends, to Drive Time here with Isabel and Richard on Talk TV. Lots of messages coming in. I love this one. We love this one, don't we, Isabel? From Rob on the road. He says, guys, I hope you realise what you're doing to us. While we're all driving home to our salads and our beans on toast, you're killing us. With fish and chip chat, I've cancelled dinner and I'm going down chippy.
We're ruining everyone's dinner here, aren't we? Or maybe we're giving them a whole other opportunity.
It's another opportunity, isn't it? And look after your local fish and chip shop. Well,
because they need it.
They absolutely need it. Everybody needs their support. And I'm quite sure down in Ealing, before getting ready for his show this evening, the one and only Jeremy Kyle has been... have you been down to the kebab shop or the takeaway or the fish and chip shop, Jeremy?
I'm eating chocolate, but one of the funniest things I've ever heard is you posh git, trying to say, I'm going down to the chippy.
now, Jeremy, Isabel...
He sends me, that's what he does.
What I want to do is compliment you, Richard and Judy.
Excuse me?
Well, yeah. He knows his place, right? Not only is he in the main chair, but then when he comes back, he says, welcome back to Drive Time with Isabel and me, Richard, you see?
I did notice that. Obviously, I ordered him to do that because I was feeling a bit marginalised.
I had no idea. Apparently, you're a couple and this has been announced and you're doing a joint show and everything. How things changed? Do you know what I mean? What's going on?
Well, I'll tell you what's going on, Jeremy. The coup is complete. I mean, you've been ousted from central London down to somewhere in West London. Is that right?
Well, you need the votes, because you haven't got many, have you? Come on, get to Ealing and get some votes. So, how lovely to see you both. So do you argue in the ad breaks? Did you put him in the same shirt for the third day, Isabel? What's going on?
This is only our first day, Jeremy, so give it time, give it time.
Who's running the show? That's what I want to know.
Well, obviously me.
Obviously me. I mean,
I've got him doing all the work, in case you hadn't noticed, but it's me pulling the strings. How about that?
Tice man the puppet cometh. That's what we love. Lovely to see you, though. I mean, honestly, this is brilliant. Very exciting.
He's grinning through gritted teeth, by the way. I can tell that.
Enough of that. Now, what joys and delights...
No, not enough of that at all. Let's talk about you two. I think we should get you on Piers Morgan Uncensored and talk about what life is like in the... Well, I don't know what you call it. Do you call it the Oakshott Tice household or the Tice Oakshott household?
This is dangerous territory indeed, is it?
I think what I do know is there was quite a lot of entertaining chat with Kevin O'Sullivan and Grace on your journos.
Thought he was gonna physically combust last night, Kevin O'Sullivan. Ridiculous, man. He was getting very... listen, obviously, on a serious note, 25 years ago today, the People's Princess tragically dying, and I think it affected, well, the world, to be honest. One waited for the monarchy, and we wondered whether the monarchy would change. I got out and about today, Windsor Castle, to just talk to the public and find out what the feelings still were. And it's quite interesting, actually. We've taken some opinions, which we'll show later on the show. It's a real split, guys, and it's interesting when you look at... I think it's a generational thing as well, because I think the older people are quite, you know, my age and your age, Richard, not Isabel's. They're quite, you know, the royal family. Diana was a beacon. Meghan Markle's a disrespectful whatever. The younger ones saying, no, they understand, in a way, how difficult it must be for Meghan Markle. I don't. So we're going to do that. We've got some amazing guests lined up as well. Pro and anti, really, the situation with Meghan, but it is about Diana's legacy, and I think that's really important, and that's the most important. The other big story of the day is the woke police. Did you see Boris Johnson's attempt to make a joke about that today?
Oh, please.
On his final tour, he went out with some police early morning, and when ambushed about Priti Patel's comments that the British police are woke, he said, well, I was with them this morning, they woke up plenty of criminals and woke them up as they arrested them. Come on, bring back Boris, you liberals. Anyway,
you could argue, Jeremy, that was, in a sense, I mean, that's what people loved about Boris. He would turn a negative into a positive. He's such a... That's him at his salesman best.
I would find it difficult to say this in front of a man who I admire and who I believe is one of our greatest politicians, but what Boris Johnson brought to British politics interested a lot more people, and I think politics will be the duller without him. I don't care what anybody says. I think that you will struggle to get people as interested as they were. I can see Ms. Oakshott is bristling at that. Kevin Hurley, former Surrey Police and Crime Commissioner, with me. And also we've got Benedict Abong, who's chair of the Haringey Independent Stop and Search. We talk incessantly about how the police have become this sort of bunch of people who sit behind computers and spend their lives as social care workers and mental health officers because they're not on the streets doing what they have to because the job has changed. They don't get intel, communities, look what happened with Notting Hill, so we're going to talk about that. And there was this extraordinary video out. Do you remember this? You've seen this with this dinner lady? It's tragic. From Lancashire, who said that kids come to school with cards. We talk about food prices and the cost of living crisis. And she's turning away 15 to 20 kids a day, not able to feed them because there isn't money on the card, because the parents can't put the money on the card because probably they're buying Sky or something, or that's me being cynical. But real issues. I heard you just speaking to Georgie. You know, this cost of living crisis, we've talked about it a lot. It's going to be horrendous for so many people, and you feel a bit bad talking about it every day, but you have to, because it's coming, and it's not going to get any easier, is it?
I think, in a sense, though, and trying to be optimistic, hopefully by all of us talking about it so much, Jeremy and Isabel,
Isabel, yeah, okay.
The government, you know, I mean, the new government hopefully will do something fast because they realise actually just how grave it is. They really do need to, within days, not weeks.
Absolutely. We need to be identifying that and getting it sorted. We have the legend that is James Whale. I'm so excited. He's going to be on Jez's Journey tonight with Maria Pukis as well. So, all coming up. Last night, I managed to put Kevin O'Sullivan in a T-shirt saying, "You've ever kissed a Tory," whilst eating a vegan kebab and chips and pouring everybody a cup of tea.
I'm not sure about that at all.
Well, you know, listen, television's supposed to be, you know, you've got to serve it up to people, haven't you? Come on, now. I would like Isabel to speak, Richard. Don't you let her speak, man. Come on, what's going on?
I'm just having visions of what we're going to put Richard in for the show tomorrow. What about your cycling outfit, maybe?
Oh, God, he's not a cyclist, is he? Are you a cyclist, Tice?
Of course, I've got to, you know, you've got to keep fit, you know. I mean...
Do you shave your legs?
Me and my lycra.
He's got a horrible onesie. You don't want to see it. You really don't.
I love this. So
I nearly dumped him when I saw it, I'm telling you.
Did you? We need to talk more. Join me after the break. We'll get the truth about the relationship. We're coming right back. So he's got an all-in-one lycra onesie and he shaves his legs. Do you pay road tax for your damn bike, though?
Goodness me, is that the time?
See? Politicians can't answer questions, Isabel, you see?
Oh, dear, oh, dear.
But, guys, 8 o'clock tonight, centring, obviously, on Diana, 25 years on, and people's reactions and what's happening with the royals now and our woke police. But really appreciate it. When you go home, put your onesie on and watch the telly.
Oh, God.
Jeremy, thank you very much indeed for that. And it will be spicy with James Whale and Marina Perkins, that is for sure. There we are. All the secrets are coming out now. Stay with us, don't go anywhere. There's lots more to come after the break. After the news, we've got Hugh Osmond, founder of Punch Taverns, talking about energy and the crisis. Stay with us, it's Talk TV.
It's no holds barred on my show, Piers Morgan Uncensored.
Idiotic, insensible, hypocritical.
The blows.
You must not do that.
The punch-ups.
Are you interviewing me or am I interviewing you?
The fights.
There'll always be somebody else to fight. Didn't come to you for long, did they?
And the knockouts. It was a free and fair election, and that you lost.
Turn the camera off.
Come and find me on Talk TV. You know you want it.
Well, of course it's uncensored.
This is Talk TV News.
Good afternoon, I'm Zora Suleiman. Ryan Giggs is facing a possible retrial after a jury failed to reach a verdict on any of the charges against him. The former Manchester United footballer denied headbutting his ex-girlfriend, using controlling and coercive behaviour against her over a 3-year period, and assaulting her younger sister. Talk TV's Amelia Harper has been at court for us.
Giggs made no reaction to what has been discussed in court this afternoon, but did hang his head when the judge read out a potential, I must emphasise, retrial date of the 5th of June. This is not a confirmation of a retrial, but a date posed for both parties to work out logistics, and they now have 7 days to decide if they want to go for a retrial.
For the first time during her reign, the Queen won't travel down to London next week to meet with the outgoing and incoming Prime Minister. In a break from tradition, she won't appoint a Prime Minister in Buckingham Palace or Windsor. Instead, Her Majesty will receive Boris Johnson at Balmoral before meeting either Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak to ask them to form a government. We've been told food prices are rising at their fastest rate since 2008, with overall costs up 9.3% this month. The British Retail Consortium is blaming the war in Ukraine for the rise, with fresh food costs now over 10% higher than last year. And the ASLEF union has announced that train drivers at 12 rail companies will strike on September the 15th in the long-running dispute over pay. It comes after members of the TSSA union also announced a fresh 24-hour strike next month as well. Workers at 9 train operating companies as well as Network Rail will walk out from midday on Monday, September the 26th. Well, that's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
Welcome back, my friends, to Drive Time with Isabel and myself. That was Jeremy Kyle, of course, as always, trying to cause mischief. He is on Uncensored at 8 o'clock. Don't miss that. I think that segment with James Whale and Marina Purkis could be really quite spicy. Anyway, lots of great tips coming in here. One from Ash says, my top tip, ex-serviceman, boil the kettle once and from then on put water in the cup with milk, microwave for 1 minute and then works for a treat, add tea or coffee. And then, and the microwave is better than using that than the oven for Sunday dinner. What do you think about that? Is that right?
Well, I wasn't quite sure what she was saying about the kettle. Is she saying you can sort of only do the tea a bit and then heat it up in the microwave? Because sometimes I do reheat tea in the microwave. It never tastes quite the same.
Never tastes quite the same. Well, there we are. We're now going to chat with a very experienced businessman, entrepreneur, and someone who understands the hospitality sector probably better than anybody. Hugh Osmond, founder of Punch Taverns and a serial entrepreneur. Hugh, very good afternoon. Thanks for joining Isabel and I on Drive Time. I mean, this must be so challenging for people like yourself. You've got, you know, so many businesses, so much experience in the sector. Is it as bad as we're hearing and reading about, or is it actually worse?
Well, I think it's still getting worse. So depending on how bad it gets, it could be every bit as bad as we're reading or even worse. I mean, energy bills are getting to the point where for the average pub and restaurant, they're potentially going to overtake the rent and rates cost, you know, which is extraordinary. If you'd said that to me, you know, 3 or 4 years ago, I just thought you'd gone completely bonkers. So utility bills are becoming absolutely the big issue for many hospitality establishments and for independent pubs, independent cafes and restaurants. That, you know, they are now the big question is whether they can survive the winter. And it's the speed at which they've gone up. You know, people weren't able to make plans, not that there necessarily are any plans. You know, if you didn't have your electricity supply and so on hedged ahead, you are completely stuffed, basically, and you're not likely to get a vast swathe of new customers with this economic environment and rising cost of living. So that's it. A lot of people will be on the brink.
And I think it's only really sort of people have woken up to the fact that we've all understood this for a while, but that actually there's no cap on the energy rate, the electricity rate, the gas rate for businesses, and in a sense. Neither of the main two parties have been talking about this. Are you getting any indication from your contacts in government, Hugh, that penny is beginning to drop and that they are looking at a proper package for business? Because I don't think this is with us for months. I think these energy prices could be here for years.
Look, I think that they're, you know, despite the leadership contest, I think there is awareness that this is becoming a big problem, not just for households, but for businesses, large and small. I mean, actually, outside hospitality, large manufacturing businesses are so dependent on energy, and it's such a huge component of the cost of goods that they are potentially even more difficulty, and not just in the UK. I mean, in Germany, you know, their manufacturing business without a cheap and plentiful available supply of energy is completely stuffed. So this is not unique to the UK. So I think the penny is dropping. Hopefully it will be the kind of small, more vulnerable businesses who get looked after first. But, you know, the issue of energy, yes, as you say, if governments don't change tack, you know, very rapidly, it's going to be with us for some time. And unfortunately, even if they do change tack rapidly, they're not going to be able to address the energy problem rapidly, because this is a product of, you know, a decade or 2 decades of incredibly badly thought through energy policy right across Europe.
And I was really struck by an article in this morning's Telegraph by Alison Pearson, just the simple sentence that thousands of firms cannot afford their electricity bills and are about to be sacrificed on the altar of the green religion. And in a sense, that picks up what you're saying. There's going to be a battle royal within government and within Westminster about how to respond.
Yeah, and look, I don't think you have to be pro or anti renewables to understand that, which I don't think politicians perhaps have thought about, that, you know, modern society, industry, the entire economy is incredibly dependent. It is absolutely dependent on a plentiful supply of reasonably priced energy. I mean, after food, it is the next, you know, most fundamental basis of modern life. You know, you need energy for everything, to, you know, to heat your home, to drive your car, to produce goods, to, you know, energy is absolutely at the source of the modern industrial era. Without it, you know, nothing can function. And if you raise the price of energy, you basically raise the price of everything. And if you have a shortage of energy, you will cut living standards, you know, unbelievably rapidly in ways that I don't think the politicians, you know, have yet absorbed. I mean, if you start having serious, you know, Germany could be 20 to 30% short of energy if things go badly for it vis-a-vis Russia. And this is the product of, as you say, it's the product of trying to move far too rapidly to net zero. I mean, particularly as in the UK's case, you know, net zero only means production of carbon on UK soil. So it says nothing about our ability to import energy or import goods that require energy that are made elsewhere. So it's a completely bonkers and hypocritical policy anyway, because we're not actually saying we have to cut carbon. We're just saying you can import goods, you can import energy from anywhere else, so long as it's not producing the carbon on British soil, which just means we outsource the problem and make ourselves totally dependent on other people for goods and energy. It actually doesn't do anything to make the planet any greener per se.
And I think you make an important point there, which is there is a real distinction between the net zero policy, which is controversial but is a response to climate change, and climate change itself. So the vast majority of people, I'm certainly one of them, really do want to tackle climate change and believe climate change is absolutely real. There's very little debate about that, but question whether net zero within the time frame that our politicians are aiming for is realistic or desirable. I think that's where the debate lies, rather than any of us sitting here pretending that climate change isn't real. One other thing I wanted to ask you about is political short-termism, because this is something that really worries me, and I've been a political journalist for a very long time, and you know, I'm struck by the extent to which our politicians are really just trying to get through the day, possibly the week, at best the month. And I'm not very optimistic that this new administration, this new Liz Truss, if it is her, or Rishi Sunak government, will make the big decisions that are required to put us in a better position in 3, 5 or 10 years' time. How optimistic are you about that?
I'm not very optimistic. Look, you know, politicians won't make decisions on these things until the crisis reaches a proportion where they have to act. And I think you make absolutely, you know, a fundamental point about, you know, modern politics across a lot of the globe, that, you know, issues like energy, but also the NHS cannot have a plan that is for one day or even 1 year or even 2 to 3 years or even 5 years, which is, you know, the length of the electoral cycle. You know, to get a better NHS or to have an energy policy that works, it has to be planned for decades. And, no politicians at the moment seem to be really doing that about anything. None of the three parties seem to make any statements that could ensure secure energy for the next 2-3 decades. They will when they have to, I guess, which will be when we all run out and start having to turn the lights off and can't, heat our homes and can't afford to fill out the petrol tanks and have hot baths and all the rest of it. But I think your point is absolutely well made. It is such a short cycle. It's tomorrow's opinion poll that seems to determine what we do. What do the voters tell us today in terms of their views of climate change? Oh, climate change is a big issue. Let's promise net zero. Whereas net zero may be an important and interesting goal, but energy security, as I said, is absolutely vital to modern society. And so if you put short-term opinion polls ahead of securing that your population can have available energy, you're going to come unstuck. And that's what's happened. And maybe it'll be events like this that are required to give the rude awakening to politicians that you can't just plan everything by the day and according to the next opinion poll.
Yeah, so it is a massive, massive rude awakening. And I think we were just complacent. We've had energy too cheap for too long. Thank you so much, Hugh Osmond, the founder of Punched Handovans, serial entrepreneur. He understands the pressures on businesses. Absolutely horrific. We'll be taking your calls, more messages and tweets after the break. You're listening to Drive Time with Isabel and Richard. Welcome back, my friends, to Drive Time with Isabel and myself. Now, how good is your grammar? Just need to know, because we've had a little bit of an observation here from someone who says Tice. Thank you very much for that. Not Richard, Tice. Isabel and me is the correct English grammar. Didn't you learn the difference between object pronouns and subject pronouns at your school? That was from Joe.
To which I say, Joe, didn't you learn good old-fashioned manners and perhaps address him as Mr. Tice, as I obviously do every day?
There we are, Joe. But anybody else with views on that? Is it Isabel and me or Isabel and I?
It depends what the sentence is, doesn't it? I think I'm quite hot on this stuff.
You're
normally.
very good. You're very good.
There's certain things that really annoy me. I don't like people saying I was sat there. I was sat doing something, because that's just wrong. You don't say that.
I don't say that. But you see, for me, I always like to say sort of Isabel and I. But there we are. Maybe I'm or Joe and I. But anyway, look forward to your thoughts on your views on that. Lots of other messages coming in, and lots of intel on the fish and chip shops. One here from...
What have we started with this one?
We've definitely started something with the chippy. JC's Chippy, it's quite a good sort of advertising opportunity, has reinvented chippy with all natural ingredients, been open 40 years, serving Chorley. The energy and produce costs spiralling, but we've held the prices at £6.60 for fish and chips. So that seems to be the going rate.
That is good. I guess it depends how big the portion is.
It's all about the size of the portions and what you do with the leftovers. We're going to head down to Eastbourne, where Ali's on the line. Hi, Ali.
Hello, sir.
How are you? What's the price of a fish and chips down in Eastbourne at the moment?
Oh, I'm afraid I haven't tried them lately. I don't know, really. I haven't tried fish and chips. I was only going to talk about the police, not the fish and chips.
Go for it. What's your views on the police? It's much more important, Ali.
Well, yes. Well, the problem is their hand is tied behind them. They can't do very much. They have to go tiptoe around the criminals. And on the end, when they get them to court, what do they get? 6 months suspended sentence?
And you say their hands tied behind their backs because they're worried about being sued. I don't know if you heard our earlier interview with the former police officer who said that they do worry all the time about what happens if they pick someone up too violently and find that they're getting sued for breaking their bruise.
Yes, of course, yes. And you know what's the worst part of it? Something nobody have ever thought about it for a long time. If the police officer have got any problem, and then they get suspended or something,
yes,
and they have to go to court or something. The police, if they don't want to do it, the chief constable can sack somebody and be the judge, jury, and all the rest of it. Did you know the police chief constable can sack any of the police officer?
Oh, I see. So you mean without the proper due process? Is that what you mean?
Yes, yes. If they don't want to go to the court and go through the hassle of it, if they think the police is going to lose,
right,
we can just sack the police officer. The law came in about 60s when they had too many not very good police officers, and they couldn't get rid of them. Yes, they gave the power to the chief constable to be able to sack them.
So they're all. What you're saying is they're all very nervous all the time.
Yes. I have experience of it in my own family.
Oh, you do?
Yes, young man was not sacked, but, discharged by the police officer.
Right.
Sorry, chief constable, yes.
Right. Did they still get their pension, or was that
No, he was a young man, but never mind. But it happened.
You've obviously got employment rights in whatever role, and I guess to a degree there's always anxiety in any business. But one hopes, Ali, that the chief constable is being reasonable and the bosses are being reasonable. Not always the case, I guess. Ali, great call. Thank you so much for that from Eastbourne. We're going to head north up to Cheshire, where Alan is on the line. Hi, Alan.
Hi, Richard and Isabel.
Hello.
Hi. What it was, I had a word with the energy company today. And
lucky you that you managed to get through. I can't imagine that was a quick process, was it? Because we all want a word with them right now.
No, it was only about 5 minutes.
Wow.
And what I found was that the direct debit that they put up 2 months ago was much too much.
Right.
And both my accounts were in credit.
Nice.
So they gave me £200 back last month, and they've agreed to give me £200 back this month.
Wow.
Well, I'm now wondering just how little energy you're actually using. Are you sitting there? I mean, obviously we've had a heat wave, no aircon in your property. Not many people have that. How have you managed to be so modest in your consumption?
Well, you're right. We have had a heat wave, and I haven't used quite so much. But what I have found is that even with those refunds, I've still got £100 credit to go forward. And that's before they give me the £33 off both accounts in October.
Well, it's nice to be going into the autumn, I suppose, in a bit of a better position. And you're right, it's important to check, isn't it, the direct debits. I mean, I noticed with my little place on the Isle of Wight that the utility company had doubled the direct debit. And I suppose when you sign up for these direct debits, you don't necessarily realising you're signing up for it to change, you know, and you're not to be in control of that process. But you can just stop it, can't you?
Well, that's right, and that's the other thing, is that actually, and many people are now stopping their direct debits for exactly the sort of reason, Alan, that you experienced.
Yeah, well, I thought I'd change it to a standing order, but having spoken to them now, and they're so reasonable, I think I'll leave it as it is.
Perfect. Well, either leave it as it is or just pay each time the bill comes in. Alan, thank you very much for that great call from Alan in Cheshire, which, Isabel, is north of Eastbourne. Let's just clarify that.
Do you know, I was so glad you did the geography there, because it is I'm afraid, a running joke between us. I don't know where anywhere is, really. I mean, I can do Scotland, because that's where I grew up, but regions...
So what do we think, folks? Is that... Who's better at navigation and geography in your relationship with your partner? Is it a... You know, is it a sort of a male-female thing?
I say Google Maps are a very good thing, although I have to say that yesterday when I was stuck in a horrendous traffic jam on the A34 and they had actually closed the motorway, the Google Maps was telling me to do a U-turn on a motorway. I'd never known that before. It kept on doing it. I was like, really? There is no option to do a U-turn here?
Sometimes I think it's better just to rely on common sense. Now, we've got lots of messages coming back. Isabel and Richard. Isabel and I is the correct grammar to use, not Isabel and me. That's from Ed in
That's what you were using originally, wasn't it? I was sure you had it right.
Well,
unusually. I mean, you don't normally have things right.
I'm normally right. What's going on? Oh, I don't know. Let's see. I'm sure Kevin's right, down in Southampton. Good afternoon, Kevin.
Hi, Richard. Hi, Isabel.
Hello.
My grammar's not that great, so bear with me. A couple of things, if I can. Rest in peace, Diana. The quicker the Queen takes his and hers, take the titles off of them, the better as far as I'm concerned, but less about them too. The police, if I can, they need to employ a real big, good PR team, because they've got a terrible, the way they're perceived now, right? What it is look at Cressida Dick, right? I'm not being funny now, right? She's meant to be in charge of the Met. Look at her. She was 6 stone wet, very, very small, and she's meant to be in charge of a big, heavy police force.
Well, I have to come in here being a small person. I'm not sure how relevant that is, in terms of her ability to do the job. She did have quite a controversial career record, though, didn't she? She is now doing something else. She's not in charge anymore.
Well, yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. I'm not being... I'm not trying to be anti-women, Isabel. I can assure you.
Or smallest, or whatever.
Smallest.
The point I'm trying to make is it's how the police are perceived now, you see. With all these cars with the LGBT things and all the rest of it, they've got a massive PR problem, because it looks as though they're aligning with one particular group when they shouldn't be. It should be a new slogan like protect all British people. And that's what, the way they look now, you see on these documentaries on telly, 10 years ago you used to see them and they should take down criminals on their own. Now it takes about 5 of them to put one person down.
Well, where I would agree with you and where we might get onto slightly more controversial territory is the weight of police officers. I mean, one thing's for sure is that you cannot run after criminals if you are grossly overweight. And I do see quite a lot of that, actually, on our streets. And I thought you had to pass fitness tests to be police officer, but apparently not anymore.
Apparently not.
I've noticed that as well. You know, I'm no lover of French, but they've got officers that look like police officers, and you wouldn't kind of answer back to them and all the rest of it.
It's a pretty good start, isn't it? You know, you've got to respect and have some sort of, you know, proper sort of caution about police officers, it seems to me. Kevin, great call. Thank you very much indeed. Coming up after the break, we are going to be talking to restaurant owner David Beresford from the Laundry in Brixton, and then the owner of Sophie's, Dimitri Solokievs. So don't go anywhere, and lots of tweets and advice coming in about the correct grammar. We'll get back to that later. There's broad consensus here, but I'll keep you waiting. Stay with us. It's Drive Time. It's Talk TV.
On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 6.
Good evening, I'm Zora Suleiman. Ryan Giggs is facing a possible retrial after a jury failed to reach a verdict on any of the charges against him. The former Manchester United footballer denied headbutting his ex-girlfriend, using controlling and coercive behaviour against her over a 3-year period, and assaulting her younger sister. Talk TV's Amelia Harper has been at court for us.
Giggs made no reaction to what has been discussed in court this afternoon, but did hang his head when the judge read out a potential, I must emphasise, retrial date of the 5th of June. This is not a confirmation of a retrial, but a date posed for both parties to work out logistics, and they now have 7 days to decide if they want to go for a retrial.
A short prayer service and silent vigil is being held for Olivia Pratt-Corbell. The 9-year-old was killed a week ago. Our reporter Jess King is there.
The auxiliary bishop who is leading tonight's service and silent vigil says he hopes this will be a moment of silent reflection and prayer. The church is just a stone's throw away from Olivia's primary school. Her family will be attending tonight, and this is an opportunity for the whole community to come together and pay their respects.
For the first time during her reign, the Queen won't travel down to London next week to meet with the outgoing and incoming Prime Minister. In a break from tradition, she won't appoint a Prime Minister in Buckingham Palace or Windsor. Instead, Her Majesty will receive Boris Johnson at Balmoral before meeting either Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak to ask them to form a government. Food prices are rising at the fastest rate in 14 years, with overall costs up 9.3% this month. The British Retail Consortium is blaming the war in Ukraine for the rise, with fresh food costs now over 10% higher than last year. And the ASLEF union has announced that train drivers at 12 rail companies will strike on September the 15th in the long-running dispute over pay. It comes after members of the TSSA union also announced a fresh 24-hour strike next month as well. Workers at 9 train operating companies, as well as Network Rail, will walk out from midday on Monday, September the 26th. Well, those are the latest news headlines. Still to come, your TalkSport update. But first, your weather with Nazanin Gaffer.
Times Food and Drink sponsors Talk TV weather.
Hello. It was the last day of meteorological summer today, and for tomorrow, the first day of meteorological autumn, we continue with the mostly fine conditions that we had today. And that's because high pressure's been in charge, but not for long, so don't get used to it, because the jet stream will be dipping its way southwards over the next 24 hours or so, allowing for low pressure to take over, bringing wet and windy conditions as we head into the weekend. So it really will be feeling autumnal. Until then, we continue with the mostly fine conditions into tonight. Clear spells across parts of the north where there may be some low cloud for Scotland, maybe some mist and fog for northern England. Otherwise dry and a cool night. In fact, quite cold across parts of the north with temperatures around freezing. But tomorrow, again, another fine day thanks to that high pressure. Maybe the odd shower or two across parts of the north, but later there may be some heavy thundery showers across parts of the southwest and some central and southern parts of the UK. It will be another fine and warm day, though. And finally, a 20-month-old girl was killed and at least 50 people injured by heavy hail falling in the Catalan region of Spain yesterday. The footage shows here hail falling on a street, and the Meteorological Service of Catalonia said that the hailstones were up to 10 centimetres in diameter, around the size of a small grapefruit.
Times Food and Drink sponsors Talk TV weather.
Hello again. Emma Raducanu says she is relieved despite crashing out at the US Open in the first round. The 19-year-old lost in straight sets, but speaking afterwards, she says she's looking forward to starting from scratch next season.
In a way happy because it's a clean slate. You know, I'm going to drop down the rankings, climb my way back up, and yeah, I mean, I think in a way the target will be off my back slightly, and yeah, I just have another chance to kind of claw my way back up there.
In cricket, England have named an unchanged squad to face South Africa for next week's deciding third test. Captain Ben Stokes and coach Brendan McCullum have decided to keep the same 14 players that saw them level the series 1-1 last week. And Wesley Fofana has completed his £70 million move to Chelsea from Leicester. The defender has signed a 7-year contract at Stamford Bridge. Well, that's all for now. I'll be back with more in half an hour.
I'm Tom Newton-Dunn, and this is Talk TV. The conversation starts here. If I had to describe Boris Johnson with 3 words, keeps us busy.
Welcome back, my friends, to Drive Time with Isabel and me. I think that's right. We've really got people going on the old grammar. But anyway, loads and loads of messages coming in on that. One says here that the rules of grammar determine whether a sentence is active or passive. Oh, that's way too complicated. Can't go there.
Way too much.
Much more interesting. Isabel and Richard, is the Drive Time slot going to be a permanent fixture? Very much enjoying it so far. Well, folks, we are on tomorrow, that is for sure. So hopefully you'll be listening then. And we'll be talking about all of the key issues of the day and the week and the month. And frankly, the issue that is on everybody's minds at the moment is the cost of energy, the cost of living. And it's not just domestically, it's about businesses. And we need to talk about that as well, which is why we're delighted to be joined now by a restaurant owner from Brixton called The Laundry, David Beresford. Welcome to Drive Time with Isabel and I. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
No, it's great. So, look, just tell us about the impact on your business, on your restaurants, David, of what's gone on, and you know, to the extent to which you had foreseen it, or which it's completely, frankly, socked you between the eyes.
Yeah, well, it's. I mean, listen, the extent of the rises or the potential rises from this October have definitely hit us hard, and they were a big surprise. I guess nobody saw the really big rises coming. I mean, we're a restaurant in Brixton. We're a local restaurant. We employ 30 odd people, all of the local community. We've got a turnover of about 1.5 million.
Wow.
And typically, you know, we were paying this October. We think our energy bills will rise 6-fold compared to October 2021. 6-fold.
Wow.
And that is, sorry, as well, that's gone up double basically between October 2021 and October 2022. That went up 2-fold, and we think it's going to go up another 3 to 4-fold, looking at the current prices in the market. So that goes from about £3,000 to about £18,000 a month for electricity and gas.
I mean, this is unbelievable. Now, tell me about the arrangements that you'd set up for those bills. I mean, have you locked yourself in to a fixed contract, actually, at a rather better time, and or are you sort of looking with a terrible feeling of doom at a contract that ends quite soon?
Yeah, well, when we renegotiated the contract in October 2021, we locked ourselves in to another 1-year contract. That's all the energy company would give us. We looked around, but even back then they weren't willing to engage into big contracts. They obviously saw the rises, you know, before the public did.
Yep.
So we locked into what we thought was a terrible contract. Now it's like a fantastic contract.
Right.
The problem we've now got, and I'm talking, I'm sure on behalf of literally hundreds of thousands of SMEs across the country, is that the energy companies won't give you another contract. They just want you to buy at the market rates because they can't control the market rates either.
Yeah.
So they're literally leaving you on a sort of on the default rate.
Yeah, we're on a default rate, and that will go up to whatever the prevailing market rate is this October. And at the moment, as I said, the rates may go up again, but at the moment they're 5 to 6 times that October 2021 rate.
So how will you respond to that? I mean, are you looking at sort of changing your menus? Are you looking at changing the way you run the restaurant? Are you looking? Obviously, you have to look at your pricing.
I think there's only one way really to address this issue and I'm talking about sort of SME style restaurants here, right? So let me just give you a little bit of background. The restaurant industry, the hospitality industry, employs about 3 million people. SMEs, right? You can define SMEs in a number of different ways, but small and medium-sized enterprises employ 16 million people in the country.
Wow.
A chunk of those will all be, you know, suffering like we're suffering. I think we've looked at changing our menu. The problem we've got, and this is a slightly different problem, but I think it's one that's within the government's control to address, is the tax burden for SMEs, particularly restaurants, is just so onerous. Even before the energy prices, these businesses don't make money. They're hand-to-mouth businesses, a bit like consumers live. You know, they get a certain amount of money in every month. They spend that money. They make tiny, tiny margins. And the problem is the tax burden, because you've got to, by the time you've paid your VAT, which is 20% sliced off your top line, plus you pay your business rates. Okay, they're 50% of what they are, but that's still a small saving. And you paid your PAYE and your NI. If then you're lucky enough to make any profit, you pay your corporation tax. But most companies won't be generating any cash before the energy rise. So they are knackered unless they're given help on the energy price rises now.
And David, what are the two key things? You've mentioned a few things there. To make an instant difference, what would you like a new Chancellor and Prime Minister to do for your industry?
Well, I think there's one obvious thing they can do, and that's significantly lower VAT. And you could apply that to certain industry sectors, such as hospitality, or certain types of business, certain sizes of business. So you could vary. I think what we need to do in the country is vary the size of VAT, a bit like we vary the income tax rate, depending on how much you earn.
Right.
Because 20% of a small restaurant business is a huge amount. It's a huge outlay relative to all their costs. If they cut VAT in half, they can easily do that because they did it during COVID and it was tremendously helpful. And a restaurant like ours would save enough money to be able to put towards its energy rises.
So that would be the difference, potentially for many businesses, you're saying, David, to keep you in business as opposed to going out of business.
Yeah, that's the easiest, quickest way to do it. Not grants.
Okay.
Corporation tax, because
David,
won't make corporation
that's
tax.
Fantastic advice. Really, really clear. Thank you so much for that. We will certainly be with our contacts, be continuing to work, and we've all got to strive to make the government understand, the new government, that this is urgent and there is one clear objective. Thank you very much. That was David Beresford from Brixton. Extraordinary, Isabel, just shocking.
And we didn't even talk about, for example, the wage inflation.
No.
So a place like that, he employs 30 people. Wages have to go up because people are struggling.
Yeah. Just huge. Just huge. We're going to head from Brixton up to Birmingham, where Dimitri Solokivis is patiently waiting, who runs a takeaway fish and chip shop called Sophie's. Dimitri, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. And I think you may have heard that comment there from David. Tell us about your business and the challenges that you're now facing, Dimitri, and what you'd like the government to do.
Well, the fish and chip industry is having a double whammy because in the last 12 months, everything that we use or sell has gone through the roof. From packaging, the cost of fish and wholesale price of chicken has doubled. Cooking oil has gone through the roof because of the Ukraine war. Month on month, our suppliers are putting the prices up. Eventually, I had to put my prices up 6 months ago across the board. Everybody in my game did the same, and we saw an immediate downturn in business.
Wow.
Because people are struggling with the cost of living. Whereas we used to be the cheapest form of eating out, you've all heard the term as cheap as chips.
Yes.
That doesn't exist anymore. We have become almost another luxury. And I just want to pick up on what David said. I don't think the reduction in VAT will make any difference. I've got two friends of mine who are at mechanic stations. Both their contracts have run out. I have to admit I'm very lucky. I managed to find my gas contract the other day, March 24. My electric is March 23. So at the moment, I'm okay. My two good friends, Mike Minaz at Broadway Chip in Warsaw and Marino in Oxfordshire, they are out of contract. Michael's been quoted last week, which now doesn't exist, 46.3 pence a kilowatt hour for electric, and that would be from $1,300 a month to $4,000 a month. That's £1,000 a week.
Sorry, what price was that a kilowatt hour again?
That goes up.
What price was that again, Dimitri?
46.3 pence a kilowatt hour. That was last week. The utility broker we used, I spoke to today, we both use the same broker, is now being quoted 80 pence a kilowatt hour. These cost rises are unsustainable. And David's suggestion of a cut in VAT won't cut the mustard, not at all. There has to be government intervention for all SMEs along the lines of either a subsidy or a business energy price cap, because these cost rises, 300 to 500% for any SME, are unsustainable. There isn't a business model out there for any business, however profitable, that can sustain these kind of rises.
So just to go back over those figures then, because I think they are quite extraordinary, can you just spell out again, I think you did give us the figures, the bill will go from, I think you said something like 1,400 to...
The electric is averaging at 1,300 a month now.
Yeah.
And with the contract he was quoted last week,
yeah,
it's going to go up to 4,000 a month, but that, it didn't take it. Now, his broker that I use as well, that's Kath Brennan from powercuts.co.uk, said to me, Jimmy, I'm being quoted 80 pence a kilowatt hour.
Has he worked out how many portions of fish and chips extra he's going to have to sell in order to bridge that gap? Because it's clearly completely impossible.
When you factor in the cost increases, people won't come in.
Yeah,
it's impossible.
There's other fish and chip shops that are closing. There's others that are reducing their hours. The National Fish Farmers Federation are calling it an extinction event, and that isn't an exaggeration. Because we've borne the brunt of a lot of price rises that are within the hospitality sector in the last 12 months. Fish has gone. I mean, I got quoted £95 a stone, which in English, I had to write it down because it was that much of a shock. It's worked out at £15 a kilo wholesale, that bulk buying, which if you went to the supermarket, that's £20 a kilo. That's more expensive than fillet steak.
Yeah, it's completely impossible, and it is. I think that word, sadly, is appropriate. It's an extinction event.
I mean,
for
previously
so many businesses.
we were talking about an extinction event generally for the fish themselves, but actually it is also for those that are selling them. I think we're going to have a campaign of some sort, save the fish and chip business.
I think save the small. I mean, just save the SMEs.
Yeah.
Yeah. All SMEs are going to struggle to the point of going under. We are the backbone of the economy.
Of course.
Let's not get about a bush here.
Yeah.
As David said, there's over 16 million people employed by SMEs. And you've got to remember another thing, the Brewery Association, fair play to them, they gave an open letter yesterday saying there has to be intervention. What happened to all that self-employment furlough we had, the bank back loan, what else we had? We had the business rates grants. All those billions will go down the drain if we don't save SMEs.
Can I just ask you finally, how do you feel about this? I mean, is this keeping you awake at night?
Yeah, until I found my gas contract, but I thought the war's not going to finish until for 6 months. So I'm worried about next March when my electric contract. Friends of mine are not sleeping at night. They're looking at going under.
Yeah.
And the other thing to remember, most SMEs have got business loans secured against their business frill or even their home. It's not just, I've lost my job, I'm going to sign on.
People's homes are at risk. Dimitri, fingers crossed you can hang on. We will be campaigning for you. The whole SME sector needs help and needs intervention now. Thank you very much, Dimitri, for that, who owns Sophie's in Birmingham. Stay with us, folks. We'll take your calls, your messages and your tweets. They're pouring in about the grammar. 0344 499 1000. It's Drive Time with Isabel and Richard. Welcome back, folks, to Drive Time with Isabel and Richard. Well, that was pretty tough, those two conversations with David and Dimitri about the challenges they're facing all over the place. We've faced a few challenges, actually, from various people not very happy about our net zero discussion.
I think people are annoyed that I said climate change is a thing. Look, I mean, I defend people's right to deny climate change is a thing, but I happen to think it is. It's perfectly clear. Whether or not that's caused by man or whether that's a cyclical thing, that's a whole separate debate. I'm much more interested in the net zero policy and whether that makes sense in the time frames that we've set, whether it's going to put us at a global disadvantage, than having a kind of circular debate about whether climate change is real.
Yeah, well, I'm clear. It's existed from day one. It will always exist. There's no question, obviously, you know, man is... We're here. Since the Industrial Revolution, actually, billions of people are leading much longer lives thanks to fossil fuels. But it's right to have that debate, right to have the understanding. But also, as we reduce emissions, it's got to be affordable and it's got to be proportionate. And moving swiftly on from that to something more optimistic, because we've had all the sort of discussion about the cost, but the comforts, Isabel, that really matter. The top home comforts. And
this is what we're going to be talking here about, what makes a house a home. And this is on the back of a survey, 1,500 adults who were asked what makes a difference between something just being all four walls and nothing very comforting in there, and what really feels homely. So they've come up with a list, 20 things. At the very top of the list is the smell of meat roasting in the oven.
Oh, delicious.
Which actually would
Absolutely
put me off,
wonderful.
if anything. I'm not sure you're really allowed to roast meat in the oven in our establishment, are you? My son likes to roast a bit of meat in the oven late at night, and then I can't sleep, so we'll have none of that. So that's at the top. And then we've got a number of other things. The third on the list is a well-stocked fridge, and I'm afraid to tell you that
I know where this is going.
The Mr. Tice is rather tight when it comes to what's in the fridge.
Look after the pennies, look after the pounds.
More often than not, I open the fridge and there's about 2 inches of milk at the bottom of a jug. It's not a jug, is it, really? Let's be honest, it's in the plastic thing. And a bit of mouldy cheese.
It's not mouldy.
And some cut price, something with a yellow label on it.
Well, why would you pay full price if you can get, something that's cut price? I mean, as I say, look after the pennies and pounds look after themselves.
Yeah, what about looking after my stomach? So what else is on here? We've got...
bacon sizzling in a pan, that is delicious.
That's not allowed either, is it?
That's allowed.
That's not allowed because I don't eat bacon because I've got a whole animal welfare thing going on.
I do, I love bacon, delicious.
He overrules me on that one. Fresh flowers, now those would be nice if they ever appeared.
I think I'm quite good with my flowers. But what about cake baking? The delicious smell of cake baking in the oven, which, of course, people need to do in order to save costs.
Well, turn off the oven because the oven's too expensive to make the cake. What about your cake baking expertise?
Look, it's fair to say we can't all be good at everything, can we? And, some of us, we know our skills and we know what we're good at, we know what we're bad at. So I know your cake baking is fantastic.
So until the pandemic, had you ever tried to bake a cake?
I think it's fair to say that I had been thoughtful about it, but actually hands-on practical experience up until the pandemic, no.
So I sent him a recipe, a very, very simple one, because we were sadly in different parts of England at that point, separated by the pandemic, and I thought I would get him having a go at baking. And what were the results, Richard?
The first one,
confess.
The first one was okay.
Did it have any icing?
Stroke average. Now, look, it was important just to focus on the basics to start with. Back to basics is the old slogan. The first one was okay. I then thought practice would make perfect.
You got a bit cocky.
I got a bit cocky, and the second one went horribly wrong.
More of a biscuit, was it?
Oh, it was just a complete disaster.
So,
it was inedible.
I'm afraid that was his last cake. So also on the list, lighting a fire during the colder months, which I think you're quite good at, the whole fire lighting. He goes all Bear Grylls. I see him, he's like crouching down a thing, like building this thing as if it's some kind of scientific experiment.
It's the hunter-gatherer instinct, isn't it? I mean, this is...
By the way,
folks, this is what we're good at, isn't it?
Well, it's what some of us are good at. Others of us are just very good at using up the entire box of firelighters. I mean, anyone can light a fire if you empty the whole box of firelighters and then put a match on it.
Yeah, well, I think, in truth, I think many people, I mean, I'm hearing stories all over the country of woodsheds that are literally bulging. People have been collecting wood, saving wood. I'm worried that wood theft might become a thing. As people are literally trying to find any way to avoid using gas or electricity.
Yeah, so I actually did stock up on wood in June when nobody was buying it, and I checked the price, and at the moment it's not gone up a lot, but I think that will change. You know, that is bound to be, because it's just simply a supply and demand thing, isn't it? What about house plants? That's also something that apparently on this survey that makes a house more like a home. I'm not sure if you're that into house plants, are you?
No, I like a good plant. You know, I like a good plant. Flowers,
do you know how to look after it?
Well, it depends what sort of plant it is. Read the instructions.
I don't think it works like that. What about scented candles?
They are great. We all love scented candles. But
we might be using a few more of them.
We might be using any candles you can get your hands on this winter in order to either save money or because actually the blackouts and there's a complete lack of electricity. It's literally back to a 3-day week in the 1970s. I mean, you just can't believe it.
You absolutely can believe a few of the other things on here, though, which is having a cat. Sadly, we don't have a cat. I quite like one, though.
Cats are great.
Kittens.
Cats are great, just wonderful things. So anyway, any other home comforts, any other top tips, folks, that you want to share with us, we will share with everyone. Thanks for those coming in. We've got one here. How does a tiny little country cottage cause climate change? There we go. This is going to run and run and run. Of that, there is no doubt at all. Coming up after the break, we're going to be talking to the former Deputy Director of Comms at 10 Downing Street, Johnny Oates, from some years ago, who you know, Isabel, who wrote a book. So that will be coming up after the break. We'll take also some calls, 0344 499 1000. Before we go to the top of the hour, of course, with the news desk, and then, of course, it's Jeremy Carr. Stay with us. It's Drive Time. It's Talk TV.
The thing that's really getting up my nose is how many of you moan about the fact that I have an opinion. I've been doing this for over 40 years. Of course I have an opinion. And if you get triggered or you get upset, you shouldn't watch. For the rest of us, an evening of entertainment live on TV and radio. Now, what do you want?
I don't want anything.
Thank you very much indeed.
Top class calls then.
This is Talk TV News.
Good evening, I'm Zora Suleiman. Ryan Giggs is facing a possible retrial after a jury failed to reach a verdict on any of the charges against him. The former Manchester United footballer denied headbutting his ex-girlfriend, using controlling and coercive behaviour against her over a 3-year period, and assaulting her younger sister. Talk TV's Amelia Harper has been at court for us.
Giggs made no reaction to what has been discussed in court this afternoon, but did hang his head when the judge read out a potential, I must emphasise, retrial date of the 5th of June. This is not a confirmation of a retrial, but a date posed for both parties to work out logistics, and they now have 7 days to decide if they want to go for a retrial.
A short prayer service and silent vigil is being held for Olivia Pratt-Corbell at St Margaret Mary's Roman Catholic Church in Liverpool. The 9-year-old was killed a week ago when a gunman burst into her home in Liverpool. Olivia was a pupil at Margaret St Mary's Catholic Junior School. For the first time during her reign, the Queen won't travel down to London next week to meet with the outgoing and incoming Prime Minister. In a break from tradition, she won't appoint a Prime Minister in Buckingham Palace or Windsor. Instead, Her Majesty will receive Boris Johnson at Balmoral before meeting either Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak to ask them to form a government. And food prices are rising at their fastest rate since 2008, with overall costs up 9.3% this month. The British Retail Consortium is blaming the war in Ukraine for the rise, with fresh food costs now over 10% higher than last year. Well, that's all for now. We'll have more later this evening.
Welcome back, folks, to Tice Talk. It's not Tice Talk. There we are. I'm thinking the boss, but it's Drive Time with Isabel and myself, we're getting all sorts of grief on the grammar. There we are. Anyway, lots of nice messages coming in here. One from Martin who says, great move with Isabel and Richard. Great dynamic. Thanks for that. We've been talking about the flowers as well, whether or not we're sending enough flowers, getting enough flowers.
Answer, no, he's not. I think he gave that up some time ago.
I think that's
he got
harsh.
a little bit too secure.
Far too harsh. Anyway, moving swiftly on, back to the world of politics and books and people's experiences. Who've we got? We've got Johnny Oates. Isabel, you know Johnny.
Well, I don't want to overstate this. Have we got Johnny here with us now already? We're looking forward to talking about Johnny's new book, which is called I Never Promised You a Rose Garden. And this is a life story, isn't it, Johnny? Hi.
That's right. Good to see you again, Isabel, and nice to meet you, Richard.
Hi, Johnny. So tell us about the book.
So the book is really about my journey through life, I suppose, which may sound a little dull, but it really started in 1984 during the Ethiopian famine and the famous broadcast by Michael Burke that led to Band Aid and Live Aid. And I, as a precocious teenager, kind of saw the injustice of all of this. But I thought I was the only person who was able to actually solve the problem. So I thought I'd better get myself...
The naivety of youth.
It was very much the naivety of youth. And it probably would have just remained a teenage fantasy. But while I had it in my head, I was collecting something from my dad from his study. And he left his new credit card, unsigned on the desk. And he had the same name as me. And I sort of kind of thought, this is a sign. I kind of have to do this. And I picked it up, signed it, got my passport, got on a bus to Jermyn Street and got myself a ticket to Ethiopia. And I ended up getting a plane to Ethiopia. And then, as you will no doubt not be surprised to learn, discovering once I got there that the demand for unskilled English kids to help out 15-year-olds wasn't great. Indeed, was non-existent. And I found myself also in a pretty dangerous situation because Ethiopia in 1984 was under a Marxist military dictatorship and it was a pretty brutal place.
So many unanswered questions here, Johnny, which I'm sure are all in the book. But first of all, I have to say that, I had no idea about this in your background. Just to tell viewers and listeners, Johnny was a very senior figure in the coalition years with David Cameron and Nick Clegg. You were Chief of Staff, I think, I'm right, for the Deputy Prime Minister, and to all intents and purposes looked rather, I don't want to say boring, but you didn't look as if you had this incredibly exotic background. So when I saw the resume of your book, I was astonished to hear that you'd had this adventure as a teenager. I hadn't realised about the credit card, and I'm wondering, apart from anything else, how your parents reacted when they realised you had not only gone, but gone with the money.
Well, I mean, I'm very fortunate that my parents were unbelievably understanding. And
I wouldn't have been, by the way, in case my son's listening to this one. He's your age, as when you were doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, look, if your son is listening, I would say to him, I do not advise taking the sort of action that I took. I was very fortunate. Of course, when I was in Ethiopia and I realised that I'd sort of blown every bridge. I'd stolen my dad's credit card. I'd run away from home. I wasn't wanted in any way in Ethiopia. In fact, I was just another mouth to fill. I was a bit desperate because I imagined that my parents would just want to kind of kill me. Because what I didn't realise as a teenager was that all my parents actually wanted was to get me back safe and sound. And luckily, they did manage to do that. But yeah, my parents were pretty amazing about it.
They must have been absolutely distraught and terrified. And of course, this would have been in the days where there weren't mobile phones. You know, you couldn't quickly drop an email. You know, so actually their initial reaction would have just been fear, I imagine.
Yeah, I think that's right. And in fact, I still got the letter because my mum kept it that I had written and posted to her and to my dad from Heathrow Airport. And rereading it actually fills me with great shame, because I think of how they must have reacted when they got that and realised I had actually gone. And as I said, Ethiopia was an incredibly dangerous place, and as you've said, there was no email, no instant communications. I mean, my dad was a clergyman. In fact, he was the rector of St Bride's Church in Fleet Street, the journalist church.
Oh, yes, of course, yeah.
So he got onto the kind of Anglican Church network, and the Anglican Church had a mission in Addis Ababa, which worked with the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and ran a number of orphanages across Ethiopia. And through them, thankfully, an amazing clergyman called Charles Sherlock sort of got to me just in time and really saved my life, to be honest.
And Johnny, from Ethiopia, you then spent time in Zimbabwe and South Africa in the final year of Nelson Mandela's presidency. I mean, that must have been an extraordinary time.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was just a massive privilege to be there. This clergyman, Charles Sherlock, who persuaded me I really needed to go home, but was very kind and let me stay for a couple of weeks at the Anglican chaplaincy. The one thing he said to me when I left was, look, you're of no help here now, but, you know, if you care about these issues and these sorts of challenges, you know, keep involved and get yourself some skills. And so I ended up teaching in Zimbabwe in a rural school after I left school. And then I ended up, as you say, in the first democratic parliament in South Africa as an advisor in that parliament. And I was privileged enough to be in the parliament, in the public gallery, when Nelson Mandela made his last speech as president, which was extraordinary. It was an extraordinary time there.
Johnny, just casting back to that adventure, as it were, or misadventure when you were 15. I mean, this just wasn't about you feeling like you wanted to have a wild time. You were, would it be fair to say you were a pretty troubled teenager at that stage? I mean, this is a very deeply personal memoir, and you talk about the struggles, and you were, in more than one dimension, you were quite lost. Is that right?
I think that's absolutely true, and I think probably most people who run away ultimately are running away from themselves. And I think that's actually fundamentally what I was trying to do. As you say, I was very troubled. It's a difficult time, adolescence anyway, but I was struggling with my own sexuality. This was during the 1980s, and I guess it was the height of the kind of AIDS-driven tabloid hysteria against gay people. And it was a really pretty uncomfortable place to be. So I was not happy in myself. I was not happy about myself. And I suppose I thought that taking on the issues of other people maybe was an escape. I found, of course, that wherever you go, you find yourself. So. And
had your parents realised about your sexuality, or you had not felt able to share that with them at that stage?
No, I mean, this was 1984-85. You didn't share your sexuality when you were gay, just like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it was... And I was, you know, very resistant to it. I was very uncomfortable. I mean, when I did finally tell my parents quite some years later, you know, they were amazing, of course, and I think would have been at any time. But you don't feel like that.
And tell us about the title to the book, I Never Promised You a Rose Garden. I'd love to know why you called it that.
Well, there are kind of two aspects of this, and some people have thought it's because there was this famous Rose Garden press conference at the beginning of the book. But that's not actually the reason. The reason is, when I was flying to Ethiopia, it was my first ever time on an intercontinental plane. And I don't know if you remember, but there were the old sort of headphones, those U-shaped headphones that came down and plugged in, and you only had audio, there was no video. And the seat I was stuck in was stuck on the country and western channel. And And as we sort of descended through the dawn into towards Addis Ababa airport, the song that was playing was Lynn Anderson singing "I Never Promised You a Rose Garden." It always stuck in my head.
Always
if
stuck in your head.
If I ever write a book, that will be what its title is.
There you are, Johnny. That's brilliant. Well, it'll be a great book for people to read. I Never Promised You a Rose Garden. Johnny Oates, thank you so much for joining us and sharing that extraordinary journey. Quite extraordinary. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll take your calls, your messages, your tweets. They're all coming in all sorts. Don't go anywhere. It is, of course, Drive Time. It's Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends, to Drive Time with Isabel and I. Still loads of messages coming in about the grammar of this, as I'm sure you both agree. It's I if it's subject and me if it's object. So both right or wrong according to context. There we are.
I think that's what I said initially.
I think that is what you probably said initially. Sometimes you're right. Just saying.
Always I'm right, obviously.
Anyway, and some more fish and chip talk. This, Richard and Isabel, this won't help fish and chip shops, but honestly, what about sell smaller portions? In the days we ate fish and chips, my hubby and I always shared a portion because there was more than enough for two. Well, anything could happen. We're going to head down to Kent, where Rosemary's been waiting patiently. Hi, Rosemary.
Hello, Richard and Isabel.
How are you? What's on your mind?
Fine. Well, just we've been threatened with electricity cuts. What I would like to know, are we going to have set times like we had in the 70s, or are we just going to go out like it was in wartime? I mean, if you're halfway through filling up your car or you're halfway through the supermarket, it's going to be quite challenging, isn't it? And are all these places going to get generators? And what happens to all your freezers? I mean, many people now have homes, in their homes, they've got freezers. So we need to cover those with duvets and things like that to try and stop them going down.
You're absolutely right. I've heard of lots of businesses are starting to inquire, Rosemary, about generators and making alternative plans. Some businesses are looking at sort of dual fuel operations. I mean, you know, there's lots of people giving a thought. I just think it's appalling. This is where we're at. But the truth is, we are where we are.
I was just wondering about the freezer point you make. Did we ever find out? I was just wondering how expensive it is actually to run a small freezer. Have we got that information? Just thinking about in your home.
Keep talking amongst your friends and
talk among yourselves. Because I think, Rosemary, you're right. I mean, anything marginal is going to go, isn't it? But then if you run a business, I mean, we've heard the Iceland operators of that supermarket, and they're in a very, very difficult position because those are enormous, those costs.
Absolutely vast. I think, Rosemary, all of these businesses, they're looking at it and they're making plans, but for some of them, they just can't see the light at the end of the tunnel.
No, I can agree with that. But, I mean, if some of the houses with freezers, I mean, I've got mine stocked. I've been stockpiling for a long time, tins and goodness knows what, because I'm a grocer's daughter and we're a bit like squirrels.
Hope the tins aren't in the freezer, because that definitely would be a waste of energy.
Oh, no, they're somewhere else. There's one thing I would like to mention to you, actually, Isabel. Would you please look up Dr. Patrick Moore?
Right.
He's a weather and climate man, and he's done core samples and can go back hundreds of years with weather. He's Canadian and lives in British Columbia, and there was an interview with him about 3 weeks ago and I can't remember who it was because it was on my Chromebook. He was, it might give you food for thought, shall we say, on climate.
All right, thank you. I get plenty enough of that from Mr. Tice sitting here. Always happy to learn more.
We're always happy to learn more. I'm learning fast as well, Rosemary. Thank you very much for that call. That's Rosemary from Kent. Coming up at 7 o'clock, of course, it's the news desk with Kate McCann. She has got an interview with Dominic Raab talking about the final hustings, and the former ambassador to Russia, Sir Roderick.
Crikey.
Sorry, we've got that wrong. Sir Roderick Braithwaite on the sad death of former President Gorbachev. Anyway, we're going to head down. We're going to head north now. From Kent to Staffordshire, where Norman's on the line. Hi, Norman.
Hi there.
Hi. What's on your mind, Norman?
Yeah, I'm a utility broker, energy broker, and
you're an energy broker, did you say?
An energy broker, yes.
Yeah.
I've literally just been into a fish and chip shop.
Oh, well, there you go. This is the best topic we've done of today.
Perfect. Have you solved their problems for them, Norman?
Well, I can solve the problem, but it's not an easy one. It's just interesting the plight that you've had on there of the other two chappies on there, one with the restaurant and one with the fish and chip shops. The costs of energy, I've seen it coming for 12 months, and at the moment it's just out of control. For instance, if this fish and chip shop, if his gas bill is something like £10,000 to £15,000 a year, to renew that in January, which is when his contract ends, at the moment would be something between 50 and 75,000.
Oh, for goodness sake!
And I see this from many customers in all kinds of industry sectors all over the country, and it's exactly the same story everywhere. The chappie mentioned 80 pence a kilowatt hour for electricity. That is correct. Well, it's between 75 and 80 pence. When some people have been paying, who are on a contract 2 years previously, that's ending in the next 6 months, they would go from sort of 15 pence, which is manageable, to 75 to 80 pence.
Which is impossible.
And it is, and it's just frightening to see, to wonder what's going to happen.
I mean, we talk a lot here about the numbers, and they are startling, but I'm interested in the kind of human impact of this. I mean, all day, every day, it is your job to talk to people about what they're facing. what's that been like for you, and what kind of emotions are you picking up from the people that you're dealing with as they confront this, frankly, pretty terrifying reality?
It is. I think it's shock at the moment. I think they're stunned. I don't think there's like a delayed reaction right now. Yeah. Because obviously a lot of the contracts I do are forward contracts, so that's not going to hit them until maybe October, November, or into 2023. I'm interested. The other area, of course, is the solution, how to resolve it. Richard's obviously got an interesting idea, although nationalisation of the industry, of course, worries me.
No, it worries us all, Norman. Mine's not full nationalisation, but it's uncomfortable. But we've got to come up with something comprehensive.
I'm just thinking I'm sure that next week, without doubt, the government is going to have to announce some kind of assistance and funding for SMEs.
They will indeed, Norman, and your job cannot be an easy one, giving people such horrific, scary, frightening news every hour of every day. Norman, thank you very much for sharing that with us. Stay in touch. We need to hear more about that. A top tip here from someone: check your insurance policies at home, whether or not food is still covered in the freezer if the electricity goes off. We've just quickly got time for a quick comment from Andy down south in Littlehampton. Hi, Andy.
Yeah, hi, Richard and Isabel. Lovely to talk to you both. Look, when it comes to the police, Priti Patel is the master of political misdirection. I think what everyone misses is the fact that she makes these bold statements and she uses a third-party proxy to do it, i.e. a newspaper headline, police get back to basics. What this avoids is direct confrontation with the police, but it also manages the public's expectation that she's passing on a message, and she doesn't actually have to do anything. What I want to see her do is get all 48 chief police constables in a room together. I want to see her tell them to get back to the basics, stop the Macarena, take the face paints off, and start representing and protecting your constabularies, which you are elected to police. And then I want to see the newspaper report that.
I think I'm voting for you as Home Secretary, actually. You sound like you've got it all sorted.
But it is basic common sense, isn't it, Andy?
Well, it's basic common sense. And Priti Patel, or the Home Secretary, and she's not the only one, but these people are our elected representatives. It's not the chief constables in charge of overall law policy. It's not the civil servants. It's actually her, and she's in charge of the department. She's the captain of the ship. She's in charge of what course that ship steers, and if it doesn't work out, she's the one that should be held accountable and responsible.
Do you think, actually, touched on it right at the beginning of the show with Peter Cardwell, Andy, do you think that actually the job is too big for one person and that the Home Office should be split possibly into a sort of Department of Immigration and then the police and justice?
Well, yeah, I mean, that is a great idea, and that certainly could work, and maybe people could actually narrow down their briefs and be more efficient in delivering those briefs. But what I'm concerned about is that not only Priti Patel, but politicians in general have got to this state where they're in this false status quo. They're in a malaise to protect their status quo.
Yes.
The status quo is a bad status quo. We need action. We need people in charge to do action and not just words, because words aren't going to shift anything. We need to see some definitive action.
You're so right. We need action, not words and waffle. Andy from Littlehampton, you sound like sort of our sort of person. Just exactly how we feel about it. Action, not waffle, isn't it, Isabel?
I hope we didn't get too much waffle from you. Do you got too much from me?
Oh,
Maybe.
dear. Anyway, there we are. That's coming towards the end of the show. Have you enjoyed your first show?
I think the jury's out on that one. We'll talk about that when we're off air. But I will be back tomorrow. I've not resigned yet.
We will be back tomorrow, folks. Coming up shortly, of course, it is the News Desk with Kate McCann, and then it is Uncensored, down from Ealing with Jeremy Kyle. He's got some great guests on. He's got James Whale